My brain served me a blockbuster dream, the reality that I want to go back to. I dreamt that I was part of some Eastern European resistance movement who had to speak in code and hide out in abandoned manors in the forest to plan our attacks against some terrible regime. We enlisted the Pope to help us, but when we went to meet him, he had double-crossed us because the regime we were fighting somehow knew the Pope was gay and was going to tell everyone. I woke up then, not knowing if my resistance group was executed or if we escaped somehow. I call it my gay Pope dream. I was friends with Jesus in the modern day and he was sound, not at all preachy, like one of the lads. I was eating the most delicious chicken nuggets ever. My oatmeal was very disappointing afterwards. When I wake up in the morning, I usually have like 30 more minutes before I actually have to get out of bed. If I'm having a dream before I wake up and I go back to sleep, I can usually continue the dream. Last night I had a dream that I was in some kind of resort or Jurassic Park-like area. I went back to sleep this morning and managed to get into a relationship with a pretty hot dude who was working at the resort. I learned I could fly, but I had to teach myself. Woke up right as I was gearing up for the big test to see how high I could go. I forced myself back to sleep, and let me tell you, flying in a dream is way too fun. I hate dreams where I'm flying, because for some reason I can't control myself and there's frickin' electric wires everywhere. He's starting to remember the experiments. Shut it down! I had a nightmare a couple of years back, and I still remember some bits of it. I was in a city where there was an outbreak of a disease. Infected people would start leaking black stuff from their eyes and noses and attack non-infected people. For some reason, I was walking in a part of the city that was completely deserted a couple of days after the outbreak. Very faintly, I heard someone crying. I approached and found out that it came from a backyard. If I wanted to see who it was, I had to climb a high fence. When I walked into the backyard, I was frickin' horrified. There was a crying infant on a leash tied to a pole. I didn't dare to approach because that young'un was leaking black stuff from the nose. I woke up after this and I was still horrified. The parents had to leave their offspring, who was still alive, chained to a pole outside. That messed me up for a couple of days. Wait, and you submitted this in a question group for people who want their dreams to continue? What the flip, man? Are you that positive in the guy directing your brain films that you were determined to see if he'd put a happy ending in there at the end? I don't get ya. I used to have lucid dreams in my early to mid-20s. As soon as I'd realize I was asleep, I'd start flying or just rising to the ceiling because it was a cool way to test it. Then my immediate thought would be, who should I pretend to sleep with? And the excitement over that possibility woke me up every damn time. I was exploring a jungle with a group of, I assume, friends. We ended up discovering some kind of temple, but it was dark, so we decided to set up camp. I was charged with gathering dry wood and leaves for the fire. While macheteing my way through the vines, I heard my name being screamed by one of the group members in a terrified way repeatedly. Woke up to see my mum yelling my name and to get the F up already, so I never found out what that temple was. And no, to answer the questions people are sending me, I've never watched any adventure movies like Indiana Jones or Jumanji, nor have I played any Uncharted game. A few months before I got married, I had a dream where Bill Murray was attending my wedding and asked to make a toast. I happily agreed. Then, before I could hear the toast, I woke up. I once dreamt that all of my family and closest friends were on the world's largest cruise ship. Along the way, we somehow were exposed to radioactive waste that gave us all superpowers or other mutations. I remember so vividly being able to use my mind to move objects with ease, and I threw donuts at my brother, whose skin had turned as hard as stone. This one girl on the cruise that we all universally hated, for reasons I can't remember, received a really random and useless mutation. She grew a really fat lizard tail, like a leopard gecko who's eaten a lot. She was crying about how ugly she was now, and all we could do was laugh at her. And then I woke up. I died in one of my dreams, so that was startling, but I was dead for a good 15 seconds or so in my dream, so that was interesting to say the least. My son is in the Air Force and has been stationed overseas the whole 3.5 years he's been in. He's in for 6 years instead of 4, so anytime I dream about him, I want to go back to sleep to see him a little longer. I had a nightmare about being a teenage girl with a group of friends on bikes, hiding from and hunting down a shadow monster that killed dogs, and we tracked it down to some abandoned house and tried to rescue the dogs. But one of the dogs started barking, and I had to try to calm it down before the monster came and got us. And my friends screamed from another room, but the dog… and then I woke up, and I'll never know if those dogs survived. I had one this morning. I'm a heavy sleeper, and whatever happens in my life tends to get into my dreams. It's a curse at times, but this morning I had an Amber Alert at 3:30 a.m., and my dream went from being okay to my friends getting incinerated by a nuke. I was the only one that survived, but by the time I was about to leave the bunker to see the devastation, I woke up turning off the alarm. I dreamt that my dad was still alive. Hell if I know, all of my dreams fade away 20 seconds after I try to tell them to someone. The most I'll ever remember is the feeling that the dream was awesome and that I want to go back. Never can. You should keep a dream journal next to you so that when you wake, you immediately start writing what you remember in it. Train your brain to start learning to remember those details. Most nights, actually. I very rarely have nightmares, and even those are interesting. Life inside of my head is much more entertaining than reality. I somehow trained myself a long while ago to be able to wake myself up from a nightmare. Pretty great. Say I'm walking down a hallway in my dream and suddenly the end of the hallway goes dark and seems a bit ominous. I look at that and say, no, let's try that again. So I wake up real quick and then go back to sleep. I have a crush of 3 years who rejected me, yet I dreamt about being with her as a couple. I know this will never happen in real life, so when I woke up, I forced myself to sleep again. Unfortunately, that was the last of it. A long time ago, I had a dream that there were some ghosts living in my family's garage. Nowhere else, just the garage. I somehow became friends with one, but she was unable to speak to me or leave the property that the house was on, and wasn't able to show any facial expressions that wouldn't be considered terrifying. Me and my ghost friend were playing on the house porch, and 2 guys were trying to break into the house. She tried to stop them by scaring the living heck out of them by making a terrifying face and screaming the most blood-curdling scream ever right in their faces. I wasn't able to see the face she made, but I somehow knew it was there, and all I could hear was the scream. The people trying to rob the house ran off, but instead of celebrating, I curled up and started crying because of how terrifying the scream had been. I absolutely loved that ghost, and I forgot that her whole purpose was to scare people. But she did it to protect me and the house. I still cried though, and she tried to cheer me up the best way she could. Then I woke up. I knew that it was a dream, but I didn't want to leave my ghost friend alone, knowing the last time she saw me was when she scared me to tears by accident. I tried to go back to sleep, and I did, and I somehow successfully re-entered the dream, only it was several years later in the future. The garage still had a couple of ghosts in it, but not nearly as many, and the rest seemed oblivious to humans. I was going into the attic and found some pictures in there of me around the age I was friends with the ghost, and on a picture, I saw a very faint image of her face standing next to me. I went down to the attic and then woke up. I didn't get to tell the ghost that I forgave her or anything, and I still feel some sort of emotional attachment to her. It was probably the best nightmare I've ever had, and one of the dreams that I've wanted to go back to the most, just so I can tell her that there are no hard feelings. I'm honestly beginning to think, while recording this, that this is all a damn lucid dream myself. I think just reading a bunch of surreal stories end to end is just not great in general for one's sense of reality. Oh, where am I? Oh boy, here we frickin' go. I had this dream which I still remember vividly, even if I was 9 or 10 at the time. So I was walking down the street and met my primary school teacher, a cute old lady with the driest humor ever. We talked for a bit and she invited me over to talk and drink some tea. I enter her house, she makes the tea, and we sit in this area with 3 walls made out of bookcases. In between these there were 2 somewhat fancy chairs and a round, low coffee table. We talked for a bit and she starts telling me how she brought me here for a good reason, and she just does some magic or presses a button or whatever, and a wall opens exactly like in Dexter's laboratory. She invites me in, and I see all of these people doing a variety of stuff. People being tied to metal hospital tables, in tubes or whatever. Everything had this technology kind of blue, and I walked through this huge mall-like revolving door. I realized I fell asleep a bit after walking, so I must have had some kind of sedative in my tea or something. Anyway, I wake up, and in my fear realize that I'm tied to a metal table without any skin. I can see my muscles, all of them, moving, twitching, and contracting, all while I'm fighting to break loose from the table. That teacher comes by and says to me in the lines of, "Oh, don't worry, it's all part of the procedure." I see other people around me exactly in the same state as me. She releases me after a bit. She gives me this spandex dark blue suit and tells me to wear it. After I put it on, I could move, like somewhat of a superhero. I could run really fast, I could jump really high. I was very agile and nimble. She told me I was some sort of recruit and that she has a mission for me. After that, I just remember teleporting to some place by my home with a girl that I knew as the other part of my dynamic duo kind of thing, with a task to catch this black invisible morphing dog. I remember aiming at that thing with something like this bulky black blaster, after which I woke up. You can imagine that young me was very teed off for not being able to be a superhero. Yeah, well, look on the bright side. Maybe it did really happen and then you were just sedated to forget everything. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I had a dream that I had a bunch of birds and snakes just living in my kitchen. They were my pets, and I was cuddling my snakes on the couch, watching Netflix while my birds were chilling out, flying on top of my fridge and stuff. It was a great dream, and it was so vivid that when I woke up, I thought, crap, I left my snakes on the couch out with the birds. I hope they didn't eat one of the birds. I was disappointed when I came back to my senses and there were no animals in my home, but relieved that I wasn't such a negligent pet owner that my imaginary snake ate my imaginary bird. My situation was a bit different. I was once having a pretty vivid nightmare about a zombie apocalypse. In the dream, I was running from a horde and I ducked into a random house. Time then passed in the dream, and I put my head down to rest while I listened to growls coming from outside. At that exact second, I woke up. I was relieved that it was just a dream because it seemed so real. However, about 10 minutes later, I fell back to sleep and the dream actually resumed. I remember thinking, oh my god, this isn't a dream within the dream. The rest was even more vivid and terrifying because I was convinced that it was real. That was a pretty rough night, but it was interesting how my dream managed to resume itself and did it in such a way that I was convinced the incident was really happening. My small 10-minute wake-up period seemed like the dream. I had one about time travel, but I had to look and be genetically different, and I went back in time, but I woke up in the middle of the night when it started. This is also the opposite, but one time I had a dream that I was in my hometown airport, a pretty big one, when suddenly people started firing weapons down the terminal. I used to work at an airport, so I found the nearest worker and had them open the nearest door out onto the tarmac. We started evacuating people as the shooting sounds came closer. Somehow I was the last person to go through the door. When I reached the tarmac, there wasn't a single person in sight. Even the noises from inside the airport had stopped. Up above me, the clouds were blacker than night, and purple lightning was striking frequently. As I walked out into the middle of the tarmac, staring into the heavens, airplanes started crashing down all around me very cinematically. Honestly, the sight took my breath away, and not in a good way. It was very dreadful and dramatic. I can still see it in my head if I focus. I woke up just as a 737 crashed right on top of me. I have a pretty crazy imagination. It was a dream where there were no debts, no stress, no pressure, no boss, no monotonous job, and no homework. Oh, you wanted details? I have no idea. I just remember the weightlessness of being stress-free, and being in a hardware store. I know the feeling. I always end up at Kmart for no apparent reason. Playing bumper cars with Voldemort surrounded by Laffy Taffy. I wish I was kidding. Had a recurring dream as a kid that everything in the works was made of this edible Nerf kind of material. You know those old circus peanut candies? Kind of tasted like that, but in lots of different flavors that corresponded to its color. So light yellow was banana, but bright yellow was lemon, like that. And it constantly regenerated, so you could just pick at anything and snack on it. I distinctly remember one where I was at the playground on the swings, but breaking off pieces of the swing next to me to eat. It was never the same dream, they were all different, but it was always in the delicious edible Nerf world. I miss that dream. A lot of the other comments are really cool dreams full of fantasy and wonder, but honestly, mine was just a really good wet dream that got interrupted, so yeah. I've recently become disabled. My dreams are of walking without pain or a limp. I'm so disappointed when I wake and my disability is still there. Well, I think you win in terms of your noble aspirations there. Way to make the rest of us feel bad about bedding supermodels or getting psychic powers and things. But seriously, that's so rough. I'm sorry. The end of the world on a beach. I was getting ice cream for my family when suddenly the sun went purple, started spinning and fell behind the horizon. All the sky followed, replaced by darkness. Gravity broke, we went down and couldn't move anymore. All the world around us started to flatten inexorably, slowly drifting towards the dark rift at the end. A voice started to call different names and people got sucked into the night. Suddenly it was my turn. I glided to the edge, freaking out, and as I fell over the horizon, I realized that I didn't have a body anymore. I was just gaze traveling in space. It lasted a very long time. We passed all the beautiful planets and slowly left our solar system. Then we traveled across the galaxy and left that too. Somewhere, far ahead, in the total darkness, faint lights started to appear. Stars and constellations I'd never seen before. I knew at this point that they were waiting for us, and even if it takes forever, we'll reach them. And once we do, all of our questions will be answered. Finally, we'll know. We'll know what's out there and why we exist. We were getting closer and closer. Almost there. I could feel it wouldn't be so long. And then my brain chose to wake up. I desperately thought, no, not now, just a moment more. But it was too late. The dream was gone. I was so mad. Sometimes I think my own brain laughs at me. I had this dream where I was some sort of undercover agent working for a secret agency. I did tens of assassinations of high-level targets. I received a task where I had to kill some low-level target inside of an office. I was suspicious, and as a precaution, I took extra explosive and ammo. I snuck into the building at night, cautiously proceeded to the room where the target was working. Through the glass door, I could see him working on his PC. I used a silenced weapon to eliminate him. After the assassination, I was curious of why I was sent to kill a low-level target, so I was snooping around in his computer and stumbled upon some rather interesting classified files which were linking the president of the country doing something which could destroy the whole country. Little did I know that they were monitoring the PC and I was caught reading those files. There were backup agents set to kill the target if I wasn't able to. They were ordered to terminate me immediately. Before I could process the information, I started getting attacked by the other agents. 3 agents entered the room and I was behind the desk, so I pulled out a grenade and blew him up while crouched behind the desk. Now starts my quest to stop the president. Entering a heavily armed base to kill the guy, the action scenes are beyond explanation. I reached the president's room and I threw a grenade into the room. Somehow he managed to escape it and went outside the base. I followed him and people were running away from something and there was ash falling from the sky. A volcano was erupting and lava was flowing towards me. I see the president on a base on the volcano, protected by some shield. I was jumping over the rocks being carried by lava to reach the president, and then I woke up. I tried going back to sleep to see if I killed the president or not, but was not able to. That was around 10 years ago. I awoke in a white bed in a white house, or plantation house or pantheon type building. I don't understand how all 3 could coexist as one, but that's how my head made it. I got out of bed and noticed I was wearing a red flannel, blue jeans, and had short hair. I walked outside. All I could see was fog and a few pine trees. There was a slight breeze in the air. Air grazed my face gently and coolly, sending goosebumps down my arms. Then I noticed I was standing on a moon pool. I looked down at it. The stars and moon shone down in such a pale blue haze. I looked up and noticed a slender figure at the edge of the fog. I watched as it or her got closer, and I began to make her out with more and more detail. She had long black silky hair that swayed gently with the breeze. A few more feet, I noticed she was wearing a white dress, and then when the lack of fog revealed her true form, I noticed her pale skin. She had an oval and very beautiful face. We stared each other in the eyes, and then she says to me, "It's time to go," in a soft but commanding way. I tell her, "No, not yet," in a stern but unhostile tone. We just exchange glances at each other for well over a few moments. Her eyes scream, "You're going to regret this," but I hold to my decision. Just then I notice a little demon dog thing by her side. And then I woke up, in a cold sweat, in the middle of the night, as 9-year-old me. I dreamt I was much older than I actually was. I wanted to go back so bad and figure out what it all meant. Where did she want to take me? Why had I stepped into that body? Till this day, this dream lays in my head as vivid as the night it happened. The 10-hour skill that could change your life forever. Learning the shortcuts for software you use daily. I basically forced the juniors to start using shortcuts, and it always pays off in the end. We're software engineers. But this goes for everyone. Designers in Photoshop, people using spreadsheets. If you use it daily, put in a bit of time to learn how to be efficient. If you want to force someone to learn shortcuts, give them the shortcut list and borrow their mouse for a couple of hours. I did this at my first internship. I'd look up the shortcuts for basically everything I did, which made me really slow initially. I'd work on trying to do everything with the fewest keystrokes. Within a few weeks, I could jump around my computer and editor really damn fast. I still had no idea how to actually code though. An interesting thing happened then. Managers and teammates would see me use the computer and presume that I knew what I was doing and then give me more interesting projects and even ask me, the intern, questions. All because I knew a few shortcuts. Microsoft Excel. If you know basic math and calculating, then you can do amazing things. I got a very nice job out of knowing basic Excel a few times by now, and I've got 0 qualifications. Excel will take you really far in the corporate BS world. If you know how to do XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP, you're seen as a god. CPR and stop the bleed. My girlfriend of 8 years had an aneurysm a month ago. I had to give CPR until paramedics arrived. Doctors said she would have died or had severe brain damage without it. I'm thankful every day I learned CPR. I'm not going to lie, I panicked for about 15 seconds, but then the training kicked in. Learning where your water main shutoff valve is for your house. I'd say spending 10 hours learning how your computer works will pay off forever. So many people are unaware of how their machines work. It took me way more than 10 hours to do my computer engineering degree, and I've still only got a basic idea. Learn how to swim. It can save your life. It shocks me how many people accidentally fall into water and die because they don't know how to swim. You can easily learn the basics and enough to keep yourself alive in 10 hours. It's insane to me that people don't know how to swim. In Australia, you're required to learn in primary school, so ages 6 to 12 depending on the state. Like including being able to do over 100 meters after 10 minutes treading water in heavy clothes just to pass. In America, it's more of a socio-economic thing. A lot of people that don't know how to swim come from lower-income urban areas where swimming pools, beaches, and lessons were inaccessible. It was a weird realization when a friend of mine told me that knowing how to swim was a sign of my privilege. Here's me learning that the super basic thing that I was taught as a standard in my country of upbringing would basically paint me as a yuppie well-to-doer in the States. I can't imagine not knowing this skill. It would rule out like all of the desirable holiday destinations. Although that's also me being a little bougie, isn't it? If you have S or any grid backfeed, you should absolutely know where your shutoff is. Additionally, everyone should learn simple wound care, and know what plants in their locale are potentially poisonous. And I'll just add, it's pretty practical to know some knots, notably the bowline, square, figure 8, and clove hitch. I've used all 4 today, and they fix small problems that otherwise become big problems. Basic finance literacy stuff such as budgeting, mortgages, negotiations, taxes, and investing. I'd argue that just by knowing and understanding these, one can improve his or her quality of life significantly. Basic investing is so frickin' easy, and people make it so frickin' hard. Step 0, if you have debt, pay it off first, except for debt at very low interest rates like a mortgage or promo APR car loan. Then save 3 months' worth of expenses in cash and just set it aside. Then we get to step 1. Open up a free brokerage account, any extra money goes in there. Buy VTSAX or any other broad index fund. Continue doing this. Step 2, congrats, after a few decades, you're now a millionaire. Resist the temptation to buy individual stocks, crypto, memes, and other hype-driven crap. Good investments don't need marketing or hype. You might get rich off meme stocks, but it's almost always a zero-sum game, meaning that every dollar that someone makes is a dollar that someone else has lost. Some basic civics. Understanding how your government actually works and is structured will save you a lot of frustration and anger. It might even save you from going down dangerous roads with your ideas. There are usually pretty good reasons why things work the way they do, even though things might seem slow and inefficient at times. Knots all the way, baby. 10 hours spread out. An hour to learn the knots, 5 to 10 minutes at a time to practice them again and again for the next few months. Square knot, bowline, clove hitch. would probably be my first 3. That covers 90% of the stuff you might need to tie. Then figure of 8 and rethreaded figure of 8 loop. This will be first if you rock climb. An adjustable hitch, like the midshipman's hitch is preferred, although many people learn the inferior taut line hitch, and the sheet bend. These knots will basically do everything you might need on a sailboat, climbing, around the house, and in the woods. You can get fancier with more purpose-built knots though, like the alpine butterfly, double fisherman's, fancier stopper knots, knots that work better in slippery rope, and the sheepshank. Learning a sewing machine. It takes a while to figure out proper tension and it will tee you the F off when you're starting out. However, once you're over that hump, you'll be able to fix your own clothes, make gifts, curtains, blankets, clothes, and costumes. The world is your oyster. How to sharpen a knife. Probably simple car stuff. Changing a tire, battery cables, jump starting. You'd be surprised at how many people can't do these things and how often those are your most common problems. CPR training, fire extinguisher training, swimming, and floating. Zipper repair. Most tents and sleeping bags at festivals are only discarded because of slightly buggy zips. Knitting and sewing. It definitely takes more than 10 hours to get good at it, but learning the basics enough to knit a scarf or sew on a button can sure be learned in less than 10 hours. It can save you a ton of money because you'll know how to fix your own clothes and make some new ones. Questioning everything. Whenever you need to make a decision, spend a few minutes playing devil's advocate with yourself, especially if it's something trivial or a no-brainer. Make it a fun yet challenging game of who, what, when, where, how, why against your alter ego. You'll learn an absolute ton about your good and bad qualities, your habits, thought processes, and you'll also learn naturally how to phrase questions or opposing views as inquisitive instead of abrasive or combative. That kind of honest and earnest self-reflection will eventually affect absolutely everything in your life. Most of my greatest lifestyle changes come from questioning things that I'd otherwise never have given a second thought. On the other side of things, constantly questioning how or why everyday objects work will give you an extremely well-rounded foundation of transferable or relatable knowledge. If you can't work it out on your own, Google it. If you ever find yourself in a conversation about something you haven't explored, use the opportunity to apply the same line of questions you would debate yourself with. People love it when someone's open and curious about something they're passionate about. Eventually, you'll be able to relate to anyone or anything at any time. Conversations become deeper and more meaningful, your connections to people become stronger, and sometimes you come across hidden passions. Having this kind of mindset has made it extremely easy to have a pretty base-level knowledge of most things. I get asked often why I know so much about different things, but it's literally just from asking questions when something I'm not familiar with comes up, or just Googling things. It makes people think you're a lot smarter or more competent than you actually are. Basic kitchen knife skills. Learning how to cut stuff properly has improved my enjoyment of cooking no end. Plus, it looks cool. I'd say learning how to communicate clearly, especially writing short or structured emails and messages. It doesn't take long to practice, but clear communication makes you stand out at work, saves endless misunderstandings, and builds respect. It's underrated because it feels obvious, but it really pays dividends for life. How do you suggest someone learn this, though? Pick something you're confident you understand pretty well. Write out instructions on how to do a task related to it for the layman. See if they can accomplish said task. Find a controversial idea that interests you and write a persuasive argument about it that's convincing in as few words as possible. Review essay writing skills from high school. Apply them to your career or personal life. How to stretch your body specifically. How about knowing when to shut up? Currently on a long vacation with my husband, sister-in-law, and her boyfriend. The only time she stops yapping is when she's shoving food in her mouth. My God.
She thinks you're vacation besties.
Well, that hilarious anecdote aside, yes. Sometimes just knowing when not to say the first dumb thing that pops into your head and being comfortable in silence is a net positive to many situations. It could save your job, marriage, or friendship. Safer bedroom fun times with the opposite or same gender. Cooking basic stuff like broiled chicken, meatballs, or pasta. It's an easy way to save a lot of money, but people are just lazy as frick or don't know how easy it is to knock out a decent meal really quickly with a few things. I was at a friend's house and they made me a plate of roasted veggies and salmon in like 20 minutes with an air fryer. Learn to type numbers without looking. I got twice as fast in about an hour. Plenty of online tutorials. Learning to ride a bike. Saying no when you need to. Oh man, that one took me decades to learn. How to pick a lock. Knots. There are many knots for different situations, and you don't need all of them for sure, but being able to attach a piece of rope to something is a useful skill. Tying knots. It's an incredibly valuable skill that I use every single day. Start with bowline, figure of 8 on a bight, klitsch hove, and double fisherman's. Most other knots derive from those ones. How to floss, but not too hard. Finger whistle without using your fingers? I feel uniquely qualified to speak to this one since I did this about 2 years ago. It seems easier than it is and took me way more than 10 hours. It took me about 6 months before I could do it consistently. Being under pressure and trying in front of people was awful. There are a few YouTube videos which really help with the fundamentals, but it's very much a trial and error thing that's really frustrating. The basic thing to know is that you need to create a small, firm channel with your mouth for the air to travel over. Start slow and don't try to push a full volume of your lungs at first. Put your tongue against the bottom of your top teeth and try to get the air to only go over your tongue and under your teeth through the small gap. You'll need to move your tongue around so that it doesn't allow air to escape out the sides. Finally, take out your bottom lip, make it taut, as in stretched tight, and bring it up towards your teeth. This will force the air coming out of your teeth and tongue gap to move across the bottom lip and create the whistle sound. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Change a tire with the tire kit in your vehicle. How to build a PC. It's really easy and it'll save you money if you ever need to change anything. Keyboard shortcuts. You can use a computer faster without a mouse. Get in the credit card game. Having a simple set of cards covering groceries, dining, and everything else, even for something simple like cashback, will pay you thousands without changing any of your spending habits. Plus, it makes your credit score go up nicely as long as you pay it off. Maybe a little longer for the travel game, but not that crazy as long as you're not trying to balance a bunch of different card providers. Only use 2. If you run a business, I'd say calling people back. Welding. Not a certified awesome welder, but 10 hours of instruction and practice would make you good enough to weld most things. Listening. For Western folks, learning to use chopsticks well. I have this weird disappearing skill with that, so when I go to the hibachi restaurant or whatever, I either look great or like I've never held that utensil in my life. Still not 100% sure why it happens, but like 20% of the time I'm an absolute moron with chopsticks. How to use a standard ratchet tie strap. I'm terrified by the number of times I hear people say, "Oh, I'm not going that far, it should be fine," as they head towards the freeway on-ramp. Changing a tire, and depending on where you live, putting on chains.
How about going south of the border on your female partner?
I remember as a teenager finding out that actress Nina Hartley had released tutorial videos on bedroom skills. I went down to the rental place down the street from my house and rented her video on that particular one. That and communication with your partner has served me well many years later. Like most things in the bedroom, an open mind, enthusiasm, and willingness to learn make for a much better experience than thinking you're an expert. There's always more to learn. First aid. There are plenty of options to learn, and in my opinion they should be refreshed once a year if possible because some stuff changes. Soldering electronics.
The simple act of soldering is pretty simple to learn. Knowing what to solder, when, how, and why is a totally different beast.
Touch typing is a critical skill that you can master in under 10 hours, delivering lifelong benefits. It boosts productivity, reduces strain, and sharpens focus across all professions. By typing faster, you'll save valuable time every day, adding up to thousands of hours over the years. Invest in this skill now for lasting advantages.
Why does this sound like an advertisement? We never had typing class in school. When I started working at a hotel, I saw a coworker touch typing and thought, that looks way easier. They could face guests while typing instead of staring at the keyboard. So I grabbed a Mavis Beacon CD and practiced an hour a day. Ended up getting way faster, and it made my job so much easier.
It took me a couple of hours to learn how to whistle with my tongue. This method is by far the loudest noise I can make without much effort. So loud, in fact, that I can give myself tinnitus. How to lift heavy stuff safely. Don't lift with your back curved. Keep the back straight from beginning to end. Push up through your legs, and don't twist your back to the side either.
Getting a couple of personal training sessions focusing on deadlifts can immediately make that particular activity much better to stay informed on, he says, having thrown out his back twice in the last year doing that activity. Generally though, yes, greatly improved strength and lifting technique. Learning how to properly fillet a chicken or fish. It takes a few attempts to nail it, but once you learn the trick, it really takes less than 10 hours, and it becomes a massive money saver in the long run when preparing food at home. Chicken especially, as most of the cost revolving around this meat has to do with the service of cutting and filleting. Once you learn that yourself, you spare a hefty amount of money and get yourself a nice amount of food for a lot more days than just buying pre-cut stuff. Also, it's not that time-consuming. Takes about 10 minutes for chicken and even less so for a fish. Well, how about saying please and thank you? Tying a tie. Learning the NATO alphabet. I still get surprised when I watch body cam videos and I hear some cops still using a non-NATO alphabet and always wonder why they can't be bothered to do NATO standard. Cranking it with your non-dominant hand. It's a good skill to have for when you break your dominant hand and your mother isn't available to help me. Knitting. Not only do you get to make your own clothing and accessories, it's a de-stressor as well. Basic sign language. Whenever I meet a deaf customer, they're always so happy that I know it, especially because I have to wear a mask most of the time. Empathy. Being able to understand, accept, and adapt to the emotional states of people around you. Understanding other people's emotions helps you to be a more efficient communicator, negotiator, caregiver, or parent because you're able to intuit the other person's motivations, needs, and boundaries, and to better understand your own emotions and actions. Or being less bothered or angered or upset by other people's words or actions. It means you're less likely to consider them a butthole and then get mad about how many buttholes there are in the world. And it allows you to be the kind of person that other people want to be around because you're easy to talk to and get along with. As for how you'd learn it in less than 10 hours, read a couple of articles, watch a couple of videos on the subject, get some basic ideas. Then practice it in conversation, either in the moment or on reflection thinking about how the other person's feelings are impacting their thoughts, speech, and choices. Don't think about whether they're right or wrong to think or feel that way, just accept that they do and try to understand how that's driving their life today. Learning the alphabet backwards. It helps when sorting things and also in sobriety tests. I used to do this while walking home drunk when I was a kid. It has never once actually come up. Learning to tie a few basic knots. Square, sheet bend, bowline, and a hitch of some kind. Learning how to type. Yes, it sounds antiquated, but if you can learn to type without having to look at your keyboard, it saves a ton of time and it's better for your neck. Make Mavis Beacon proud. Playing the ukulele. Grab one online and get one of those little clippy tuning thingies for cheap, and my personal recommendation is to grab some felt picks too. They won't catch on the strings as much as plastic picks or your nails. In 30 minutes, you'll know at least 3 chords. Another couple of hours and the island strum becomes second nature. Once you know C, G, F, and A minor, the hardest one is G, but it's still not that hard, there are loads of songs you can learn. Learn E7 and then you can play the classic Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I'm still struggling with the straight E chord though, but that's universally known as bigger to learn. I tried to learn guitar years ago, but the metal strings were too painful. Ukulele strings, on the other hand, are plastic. I can't sing. I learned a tiny bit of keyboard when I was in school. Enough to play Mary Had a Little Lamb with one hand and not much more. The point is, I'm generally not a very musical person, but within a week of trying to learn for an hour or so per day, I could bumble through I'm Yours by Jason Mraz and Riptide by Vance Joy. Body weight exercises and stretching. If able, within 30 minutes every other day at least, a consistent body weight workout will make later life much easier and promote better body health habits all around. And it's free fitness. Small talk. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but you never know who you'll meet or what they'll know. When I first moved overseas, I had a small talk with some guy and he told me all of the roads to avoid at night, how to use contactless payment, bus routes, and which stop has the cheapest and best kebabs. Quality convo. Need versus want. Most people confuse the two. Knowing how to plug a flat tire. It's simple and it can save your butt. Juggling. It's not really important in life, but absolutely fun to do whenever you have a bunch of similar objects laying around. Proper PPE usage. The NATO phonetic alphabet. M as in Mike is clear. M as in mice is not. Good manners. Thank you. CPR and first aid classes. Patching holes in clothing, as well as sewing basics in general. Learning to read Korean. The caveat is that you need to understand Korean in order for it to be useful. Learning to speak without saying and so on. It will make you sound way more confident and well-spoken, even if the content of what you're saying has not improved. Deleting the Facebook and Twitter apps off your phone. Being nice to people. I once listened to a 6-hour podcast about ETFs, learned all that I needed to know about it. Yeah, I've invested a few hours into learning about them now, and to be honest, I'm still not confident I totally know how. A few more showings of the many identical YouTube channels on how to instantly become a millionaire, and I'll probably be set, right? How to shut the water off on an overflowing toilet. Filing your taxes. These are quicker than 10 hours, but I think they're still good. Control plus backspace deletes the entire previous word. Percentages are reversible. 8% of 25 is the same as 25% of 8, but 1 is much easier to work out in your head. Saying, I don't know. Changing both a bike tube and a tire. Changing a car tire as well. Learning to type without looking, aka touch typing. I've had this random fun idea during COVID and it's been a hack every time. Your mind is clearer when you don't need to look for the keys. Takes less than 10 hours to change your technique and to be of normal typing speed, which is around 40 words per minute. To further the skill, I allotted around 2 hours daily and I achieved 100 words per minute in a month. Investing in index funds. Sewing. Being able to repair your own clothes is such a money saver in and of itself, but sewing and other fiber skills is so versatile it will never stop paying off in so many ways. Using your mouse left-handed. It takes maybe 30 minutes and will save you from wrist pain for your entire life if you use the computer a lot. Learning basic cooking skills can completely change your life. Just knowing how to make simple, healthy meals saves money and keeps you healthier. Another is touch typing. It boosts efficiency forever. These investments pay dividends daily for the rest of your life. The shocking origin of something that everybody loves. I met a writer named Thomas Desch when I was in college. He wrote The Brave Little Toaster. He told us Disney hired him to write a movie about lions. He wanted to do King Lear with lions because the plot mirrored how lion prides operate. Old, lazy but powerful male, dangerous daughters. But Disney said they wanted a young hero, so he changed it to Hamlet with lions. Uncle kills father, kid runs away, ghost of dad visits and calls for revenge, but with a happy ending, like Timon and Pumbaa, a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. He wrote a 9-page treatment and turned it in. They said thanks but no thanks and then fired him. The movie comes out. It's pretty clear they've taken his idea and they didn't pay him. He said Disney was notorious for doing this to creators. I read years later that he'd sadly taken himself off our mortal coil. I never think about The Lion King without thinking about him. They made so much money off his idea and he got nothing. I'm not diving deep into big authorship questions, I'm just passing on the story about how I remember it as he told it to us. This was 25 years ago that we met him. All movies are collaborations. I don't think this defined his life or that his ending was an outcome of Disney's poor treatment of him. He told my creative writing class that story to teach us about the perils of writing creatively for corporate clients. He wasn't super angry about it, just annoyed. He was a great writer and was still struggling financially when that happened. The larger point is that he felt exploited, and it sucks when big corporations don't share their profits with those who contribute. Sherman Kelly wrote the lyrics to Dancing in the Moonlight while recovering from a violent attack carried out on him and his girlfriend by a youth gang. He envisioned an alternative reality where people just danced and were happy all the time. It was his way of dealing with the trauma. God, to think that so many people have such good memories from that song, though. He really created something beautiful for everyone from his trauma. Access to comfort and reframing traumatic situations in a healthy way is a good way to avoid PTSD too. So I hope it was somewhat of a therapeutic thing for him to write it. Like Weird Al. Both of his parents died on the same day of carbon monoxide poisoning. He still lit a concert that night saying, "Since my music had helped many of my fans through tough times, maybe it could work for me as well." Canonically, Chuck E. Cheese is an orphan who never knew when his birthday was, so he celebrates other people's birthdays to fill the terrible, painful void of his abandonment. Plus he's a rat. A powerful rat named Charles Entertainment Cheese. Okay, you aren't taking this question seriously.
But once again, I can't be reminded of literally any of the lore behind risky child's entertainment cheese without smiling, so now you all get to hear it again. In the animated film All Dogs Go to Heaven, the actress who plays Anne-Marie was killed in a horrible domestic situation prior to the film being released, along with her entire family. Burt Reynolds struggled hard to finish recording his scene where Charlie says goodbye to the little girl one last time before going to heaven. It's a tear-inducing scene without knowing the backstory, but you can absolutely hear the pain in Reynolds' voice. It's generally considered a very loving and touching moment, but knowing what happened makes it really hard to listen to without getting emotional. Wow, thank you to all the others chiming in here. I didn't realize that she also voiced Ducky from The Land Before Time. The song Save the Last Dance for Me by the Drifters was written by a man who was crippled by polio and in a wheelchair, watching his new wife dancing with other men at his wedding to her because he couldn't. In the song, he's saying that he's the one taking her home, not them. I don't think he's angry, he's just saying that no matter who she dances with, she's his wife and will be taking her home at the end of the night. Candyland was invented during the polio epidemic by retired schoolteacher Eleanor Abbott, who herself was recovering from polio. She invented the game to keep children entertained during their hospital stays who themselves were affected. Scottish Folds. Those cute cats with the folded ears. They have those ears because of osteochondrodysplasia. It causes joint, cartilage, and skeletal deformities. There's no treatment, only pain management. Those poor cats are in constant pain. I learned something new and sad today. Cats are so good at masking pain, so it makes it even worse. For a while, Neopets was owned and operated by Scientologists. They wanted to add religion to it while they had it. The kids' book, Love You Forever by Robert Munsch, As Long as I'm Living, My Baby You'll Be, was written in the wake of the author and his wife losing their twins. Sadder yet, it was a lullaby he sung to himself to cope years before he wrote it into a book. It's one of the most intimate connections an author's ever made with millions of people. The Wizard of Oz could have had its own behind-the-scenes movie with the amount of crap that went down. The Tin Man actor switcheroo. The original actor got massively sick from the silver body paint and couldn't continue, so they recast the role. If you listen to the soundtrack carefully, the two tracks of We're Off to See the Wizard, After Meeting the Tin Woodsman, Then the Lion, both have Buddy Ebsen's voice, not Jack Haley's. They didn't bother re-recording those two. And Margaret Hamilton got badly burned by one of the takes of flames shooting up and her disappearing through the trapdoor in Munchkinland. As the green makeup was copper-based, there was a bit of a race against time to get what they could off her burned hands so it wouldn't poison her. As her appearances in Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood still testify, she still thoroughly enjoyed the part. Free school lunches in America started because the military complained that during World War II that many 18-year-old men were too skinny to serve in the military. Free school lunches were added afterwards to make 18-year-old men strong enough to be drafted into the next war. Everything about school in America seems to be about the war. Same thing with gym. The only reason phys ed exists in the first place is because they wanted to train people to be fit for going into the military. The voice actor for the classic Disney Peter Pan died alone after taking too many substances in an abandoned warehouse after years of being unable to get work in Hollywood later in life. The creator of Monopoly actually intended it as a warning about the dangers of capitalism, not a celebration of it. Nintendo started as a card company in the late 1800s. It probably would have gone defunct were it not for the Yakuza.
Yeah, but the number of Japanese companies that applies to is actually pretty high.
Dole, the banana company, overthrowing the Queen of Hawaii.
Also Chiquita Bananas, United Fruit Co., in Guatemala, hence the term Banana Republic.
Corporate horrors really have no limit. Look up how many people Nestle killed in Africa. The snake that's killed in Friday the 13th was a real snake. To make matters worse, it wasn't some wild snake they found in the woods, it was somebody's pet that had to watch his snake get killed. He apparently had no idea and had to be held back from punching the director. There were a lot of shady things that went on with the production of those films.
At one point, a director kept making an actress film in freezing water over and over again and was only stopped because the actor playing Jason in that one refused to keep filming unless he gave her time to dry off and warm up.
Valentine's Day. Saint Valentine was killed for being the priest to marry people so men could get out of war. For this, he was beheaded.
Well, yes, that does seem like a bit of an overreaction.
Resusci Annie. the rubbery anatomical model we learned CPR on. The face is modeled after the death mask of an unidentified and unclaimed woman who drowned in the Seine River in the late 1800s. Toymaker Osmond S. Lairdal chose to use the woman's face on the mannequin as he thought male trainees might be reluctant to kiss a man's face. The face was sculpted by the Norwegian-Danish sculptor Emma Mathiesen. There's also plenty of evidence stating that only having a male CPR dummy with no visible chesty bits has inadvertently caused harm to women requiring CPR because women don't know how to give CPR to someone with a female chest. Went to a community event last night, and 32 years later, the Macarena still fills the dance floor. A bunch of teens learned the dance for the very first time. The lyrics are, of course, in Spanish, and about the titular Macarena having a big old communal romp with her boyfriend's friends while he's off swearing his military oath. Also interesting is that the band played traditional music primarily, and this was their first pop release. When they were in their 50s, they went back to traditional music straight afterwards. The little girl who played Matilda in the movie Matilda, her mum had died of cancer before the movie was released. I believe the director showed the mum a rough cut before she passed, but geez, that made me sad to learn as an adult. I'm pretty sure that Danny DeVito and his wife Rhea Perlman, who were Matilda's parents in the movie, they took her in for a bit while this was going on. The weirdest trivia I know about her, Mara Wilson, is that her cousin is Ben Shapiro. When I was 10 or so, my sisters and I were doing a common counting rhyme to pick something, maybe who went first in the game. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. My dad walked by and quietly commented, "When I was your age, that word wasn't tiger, but we didn't know better back then." My mum used to tell me they called Brazil nuts, like the big ones in the mixed nut bags you buy at the grocery store, N-word toes. And that first nursery rhyme was at least prevalent up until the early 2000s while I was growing up. So my money's on it still being around in its censored form. We should really get a new one. Most fairy tales. Disney has scrubbed all of the Grimm out of the Brothers Grimm. In the original story, the queen in Snow White is put in red-hot iron shoes at the wedding and made to dance until she falls down dead. This is often mentioned concerning interesting trivia about certain songs, but Stayin' Alive by the Bee Gees, the immortal disco anthem, is about how life in New York in the 1970s sucked, and people often felt lost with no purpose. Life going nowhere, somebody help me, and the only thing they had to fall back on was dancing at the club. Feel the city breakin', everybody's shakin' and we're stayin' alive, stayin' alive. Mary Kay Bergman was an incredibly wonderful voice actress who was known for her roles such as Snow White from 89 to 99 and Daphne Blake from 97 to 99. In 97, she joined the original cast of South Park under the name of Shannon Cassidy in order to not cause issues with Disney and her roles as Snow White. She voiced all of the female characters in South Park until 1999. In November of 99, she spent the day contributing to a Disney radio program as Snow White, and then that night she went home and took action to not be alive anymore. She used a firearm and left 2 notes for people she loved, stating that she couldn't handle her fear. Matt Stone and Trey Parker were initially so impacted by it that they couldn't even issue a statement about losing her for a bit. In the Mr. Hanky Christmas sing-along episode, the final number is "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" as a direct tribute to her. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Best Friends Animal Society was founded by Scientology members who formed their own cult spin-off, the Process Church. They associated with Charles Manson and David Berkowitz, and the author of Helter Skelter postulating that Manson was heavily influenced by Process. The rescue was originally a grift to keep their church going. They eventually moved to rescue full-time after realizing how incredibly lucrative and, like their church, tax-free that it could be. With $200 million in assets, $314 million in 2024 revenue, and 2 private jets, you can see just how well their grift has paid off. Ghislaine Raza, that Star Wars kid pretending he was a Jedi, had his video posted onto Kazaa without permission by his schoolmates to prank him, and as a result he was bullied at school. People made fun of him online, gave him death threats, told him to end himself, all for pretending to be a Star Wars character, which is honestly a completely normal thing that kids do. He also had to go to a mental hospital, and his parents sued the kids who uploaded the video. Luckily, he did return to school to finish his senior year and went to McGill University in Montreal.
got a law degree, and he became president of his city's Heritage Society. White Christmas was written by Irving Berlin, a Russian Jew, ostensibly about the loss of his child on Christmas Day 1928. You basically couldn't get a bleaker backstory for a beloved Christmas classic. The guy who started the black and blue or white and gold dress debate from 2015 was charged with attacking his wife. Amish people are supposedly these honest farmers eschewing modern ways, but Amish are actually running gigantic puppy mills for big profit. They stack cages floor to ceiling, treating the mum and dad dogs with abject cruelty, never a kind word or a touch. The dogs rescued from these puppy mills are the most traumatized and mistreated dogs I've ever fostered. We fostered over 220 dogs. One sad, fearful dog wouldn't let me touch him for 3 weeks. Another just had to be euthanized because of chronic untreated ear infection for years, causing end-stage ear growths, which plugged his ears and made him deaf and in constant pain. So screw the Amish, cruel, greedy animal mistreaters. I'm in the horse industry and I've worked with a number of ex-Amish horses. They're so shut down and broken because they don't even know they can fight back most of the time. They're just treated like machines by the community and are discarded when they break down. The company that makes sleepy time tea, Celestial Seasonings, was invented by a weird cult that promotes racism and eugenics as a science, and has integrated their teachings into the branding and marketing of said teas. It's real weird. The Volkswagen Beetle was a beloved car with a quirky design. It was also commissioned by order of the leader of the Third Reich, and designed by Ferdinand Porsche as an affordable, practical vehicle for the German public. Its original name was the KDF-Wagen, which was an abbreviation of the leader's youth group motto, Kraft durch Freude, or Strength Through Joy. Bananas. You thought substances were a blood-soaked cartel and war-driven commodity. The banana trade makes white snow look like a farmer's market. Also chocolate, coffee, tea, spices, and most tropical fruits. And meat, and seafood. Basically everything we eat, wear, and use. Private military conflicts in general are an incredibly interesting and eye-opening rabbit hole. Dole specifically is worth reading up on for anyone interested in corporate warfare. Henry Ford promoted square dancing in public schools, starting in the 1920s. Sounds wholesome? He did it because he hated Jews and thought they invented jazz. He wanted to get America back to traditional, white and Christian music and dancing. Sea monkeys. Harold von Braunhut was an American mail-order marketer and inventor, most famous as the creator and seller of both the amazing sea monkeys and the X-ray specs, along with many other novelty products marketed towards children, often advertised in comic books. Despite his Jewish upbringing, he closely associated with white supremacy groups. He helped buy firearms for a Klan faction in Ohio. He was a regular at the annual Aryan Nations World Congress, where he sometimes had the honor of lighting the cross. Quality guy. The history of the dunk tank. To explain using the Wikipedia for this particular device, the African Dodger, otherwise as hit the slang for raccoon that we can't say on YouTube because it's also a racial slur, later called hit the N-word baby, was a popular game up until the 1960s. Then it got rebranded to Drop the Chocolate Drop with the slogan, amusing to all but the victim. Seriously, what the frick? The reason cats and dogs like squeaky toys is not because the noise is funny, it's because the sound is similar to the death screams of their prey. The Chippendales dance scene with Chris Farley on SNL was actually viewed as a negative thing by Chris and the cast afterwards. It was demeaning to his body image and ultimately did him no favors. Oneida Limited makes tableware and cutlery. They've been in business for nearly 2 centuries and started as a communist bedroom cult built around group marriage. Alfred Nobel, the creator of the Nobel Prize, was the inventor of dynamite and amassed his wealth by developing, manufacturing, and selling explosives, the weapons of mass destruction of his day. A French newspaper mistakenly published an obituary for his death when another arms manufacturer died, calling him the Merchant of Death. Seeing what his legacy was and how he and his family name were going to be remembered, he changed his will to found the Nobel Prize. I would note that the newspaper was being a bit unfair to him. Nobel made his fortune from explosives, yes, but they were primarily used in mining and excavation, not in warfare. His inventions were primarily focused on making explosives safer to handle, and thus usable in more delicate situations, not making them more effective for artillery.
Yeah, the man can hardly be blamed for trying to refine what was basically a poorly understood and slapdash product at best into something infinitely safer to use. It's not really his fault that that meant that people used it to manufacture arms instead. Coco Chanel was a supporter of that German party led by that guy. In other words, she was a Third Reich enthusiast. Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind, the chorus of which was used by commercials and movie trailers in the 90s, is actually about being a substance addict. The song My Sharona by The Knack was about the lead singer perving on, well, someone he definitely shouldn't have been interested in. It's still a very catchy song on the surface, but it's still a song about a pretty crappy guy admitting to something that we can't really say all that comfortably on YouTube. On a similar note, the guy that lost 300 pounds by eating Subway didn't lose weight by eating Subway. He lost weight by walking daily to a particular Subway that wasn't even the nearest one, just so he could see an underaged girl that worked there. And, well, that was far from the worst thing he did with people under a certain age bracket. Seriously, screw Jared. Horton Hears a Who was written after Dr. Seuss visited a post-World War II Japan and saw people in Hiroshima trying to rebuild their lives, and basically serves as his commentary on the whole interaction between the US and Japan, both pre- and post-bombing. The song Pumped Up Kicks is catchy and was used in things like commercials and children's parties years ago. It's also pretty clearly about committing a school firearm tragedy. It's not like you even have to dig through layers of hidden meaning or decipher some kind of complex metaphor to get there. It's explicitly about how some of the others had, quote, better outrun my bullet. Pugs and other similar dog breeds suffer all of their lives because of selective breeding, leading to the deformation of their faces, legs, bodies, and skin, plus cardiac and respiratory issues. I really hope they get extinct someday because I can't bear watching such an aberration of nature due to human vanity. No thing should suffer their entire life to only look cute or adorable or luxury. Alice in Wonderland was written by an adult man, Lewis Carroll, on a boat with 3 young girls, aimed at one of them, Alice. They enjoyed the whimsical story so much that they said he should write it down. It's been heavily theorized that he was trying to woo the 10-year-old girl, and there were pages of his diary that were removed by his family. His relationship with younger people was seen as unusual at the time, and it was he, 30 years old at the time, and his friend, a 24-year-old male, on the boat with these 3 children, and there were no familial ties. He was good friends with their father, he was part of the church, and he'd often have picnics with the family and the girls. There was an end to these and a huge falling out between Lewis and Alice's family a year after the boat story. The pages in his diary around this time are torn out. 3 years after the boat story, he did publish Alice in Wonderland. There are implications from his family's journals that he intended to wed Alice or Alice's mother in the future. Yogi Tea is owned by a cult, allegedly. But the sweet little affirmations. Actually, it is a bit culty, isn't it? P.T. Barnum's whole circus story. That guy was a monster in real life and horrible to his workers and his family alike. Greatest Showman is a fun movie, but do not take that as the truth. The data which is used for calculating the chances of naval rescue missions comes from human experiments in those camps in World War II. They threw inmates into water tanks of different temperatures and measured how long it took until they froze to death or drowned. Mormonism's got a closet of nearly all skeletons and no garments. I had many Mormon friends growing up, they had huge families, and such a seemingly joyful sense of church and community, and I was jealous that I couldn't be a part of that. Then, as we got older, I started finding out all kinds of messed up stuff that was going on behind closed doors. Repression, affairs, insane control tactics by the church. One of my best friends was basically locked down by her parents and wasn't allowed to have contact with non-Mormons anymore. I was just a teenager, but it was so obviously cultist behavior. The positive truth the media won't show you. Is the future actually better than we think? Solar energy plus desalination plus gene therapy. Using gene therapy to build a human that can drink salt water and use sunlight like a plant? Yes, I await the day as well. All 7 of my honeybee colonies are currently surviving the winter, and today they're bringing in the first pollen of the year. Also, please support native bees, as well as butterflies like the monarch and bats. For why and how at home, check out Bringing Nature Home by Douglas Tallamy. People in my field are talking about the cure for cancer. Stanford Medicine made the biggest breakthrough in history just this year. They cured 90 out of 90 infected mice with different kinds of cancers with just 1 shot of medicine. The possible return of the American chestnut tree. Fast-growing, rot-resistant, and perhaps most importantly, it produces enough calories from the nuts to feed a population. Long ago, the death of the American chestnut was partially responsible for the severity with which the Great Depression struck Appalachia. Chestnuts were a primary food supply for backup reserves in the form of herds of pigs that were allowed to free roam. The pigs could be sold or slaughtered to keep families afloat during hard times. The disappearances of the chestnuts killed the viability of the pig herds, causing the economic failsafe to collapse ecologically at the same time that the Great Depression made monetary reserves worthless. The good news is often quiet and subtle. The bad news is almost always loud. I try to remember that. Our headlines are splashed with crime, yet for every criminal there are 10,000 honest, decent, kindly men. If it were not so, no child would live to grow up. Business could not go on from day to day. Decency is not news, it's buried in the obituaries, but it's a force stronger than crime. Yeah, this makes a very good point. I do think we owe it to ourselves to sprinkle some good news into our day from time to time. The trick is not gorging on it and blocking out the very real issues with the world that we owe it to ourselves to act on and vote, fund, and fight about. Then read up on the positives to help you sleep at night. And yes, it's easier to talk about this balance than find it, by the way. Advancements in health studies and science for health has improved living conditions tenfold and continues to do so. So that makes me pretty optimistic. My students. They handle a complex, globally interconnected society in ways that my generation, I was an undergraduate at university in the 1970s, just couldn't hold a candle to. Any color, any orientation, any disability, any nationality, it's all good so long as they're not a jerk. We may be approximating Dr. Martin Luther King's hope for a world where people are judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. I see the same thing in my students. I teach preschool, and today, a little boy whose parents are from Somalia, a little boy who's from Kyrgyzstan, a little boy from Peru, and a little girl whose parents are from Mexico built a castle together. They don't care what color you are or where you're from. They just like building together. The bee population is on the rise. If we could work together to save the bees, we can deal with climate change. Advancements in medicine and gene therapy. The CRISPR technology has me very excited. Also, the James Webb Space Telescope is going to bring about many new discoveries. Space! So much is unknown about space right now. I'm excited to see what could come in the future. Understanding of history. We're at a certain point in time during which we're all well aware of what happened in the past. This is a newly available, highly useful feature of our generation. Hopefully, it lasts. We're almost at the point where we can get artificial organs. I could use a kidney. Mental illness awareness is growing rapidly, and people are more and more willing to assist those in need. Not only that, but people with mental illness are becoming less and less ashamed of said illnesses and actually seeking out help. Stigma goes both ways. The fact that humanity is getting another mini space race going on. I'd love to see a man set foot on Mars in my lifetime. That, and of course, just getting to spend time with all of my friends to play Dungeons & Dragons every week. I'm going to nursing school, and every time I hear about the advances in the medical field, I get excited. Japan just approved a medicine that they claim can cure the flu in one day. The merging of medicine and technology is extremely fascinating. I saw a video of a prototype that was a virtual scan of somebody's body inside and out. You could remove organs and see what was under them. If that can catch on, it will dramatically help surgeons plan for more successful outcomes. I have a neuropace in my brain to help control seizures. Responsive neurostimulation. I'm on the first few steps of transhumanism, and I wake up every day realizing that this cutting-edge technology in my skull will one day be the peg leg of neurological procedures. Press forth, my friend. Shared collaborative projects like Wikipedia proving that people are inherently good. Just remember to use the sources given in the Wikipedia page, not the wiki itself as your reference. The increasing easiness of traveling anywhere in the world. The more people travel, the more compassion and open-mindedness they have. I can't think of any travelers I've met who've been rude or close-minded. I'm sure they still exist, but it's such a cool and wholesome thought. There are still people at your income bracket that donate about half of their money every year. Much to the amazement of the trauma surgeons who first received me at the hospital after I'd been found on the side of the road with a face full of glass after being on the receiving end of a hit and run, I'm not brain dead, brain damaged, quadriplegic, paraplegic, nor did they even have to make me an amputee. I'm learning to walk again. The future's looking good, until I have to go through the TSA again, that is. reruns of Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers. I got drunk one night and watched some Bob Ross on Netflix, and it was a revelation, man. It's impossible to feel bad when you're watching him paint. So much joy. I guess that's why they call it the joy of painting. That every day, millions of people go to work in order to provide for their families, come home, talk about inane things, stuff like that. The world over consists mostly of people with similar wants and similar needs, no matter from where they hail or what they look like. And the vast majority of the time, it just works. One tiny lapse in coordination and it could all come crumbling down, but mostly the world just marches on. It's a brilliant blue ball of common humanity, and it pays to remember sometimes that for all that's horrible in the world, we're surrounded by a lot of good. I think we're making great progress with renewable energy, and I'm hopeful that my children's generation will have the chance to fix the mess that we've made. People are beginning to realize that things don't change on their own. More people are taking action to help out and change the world as a whole. As someone with mental health issues, I love that the field is getting more attention and there's becoming less of a stigma of having a mental illness. A relative of mine checked into a mental hospital yesterday with depression and bipolar disorder. The amount of support he received from friends and family was very encouraging. Every day we get closer and closer to a cure for cancer. My mom told me about her diagnosis on Sunday. Both of her parents died of cancer too, 12 years apart. Hopefully in the near future it's something we won't have to worry about. The plummeting price of solar and wind energy. Yeah, absolutely. In Australia, there's been an incredible penetration of solar power in the last 10 years, all driven by the economics of solar power. And that's in the last decade, folks. Well, 2018's even better than the last 10 years in terms of prices, payoff periods, and sales of solar panels have reflected that. People are installing their panels en masse with zero subsidies. Businesses, big and small, covering their roofs. It's so crazy that there might be a glut of power in South Australia, when the sun shines at least, in as few as 5 years' time, considering the rate of growth. On one Sunday a few months ago, 50% of all power in South Australia was generated by rooftop solar alone. That's not even including wind and other large-scale renewables. We don't have hydropower in South Australia. The magic of all this is that it only took a few years of government investment. The market has ramped up, partly in thanks to those subsidies, and we're reaping the benefits, and we will be for years to come. The thing about reading other people's opinions on the internet is that we sometimes pick forums from quite a while ago. I can't track how fast some of these developments have come in the years since. Some of the climate ones may have taken a step back with Trump's second presidency and other right-wing governments around the world, but at the very least I can report that solar power in Australia is still on the rise since this comment was written in 2018. Good on them. I quit smoking today.
Oh, congratulations. I quit last month after smoking for 20 years. I couldn't be happier.
Since 1990, the number of children who die before their 5th birthday has been cut in half, saving 122 million young lives. In the same period of time, the fraction of people living in extreme poverty has gone from 1/3 to 1/10. More than 90% of children now attend primary school worldwide. In other good news, women now make up more than 1/5 of members of parliament around the world, and workplace and road safety in the US has risen dramatically since our grandparents' time.
You know, with all the cynicism and the stories that the media put out these days, it almost feels like humans are failing. For example, I can't count the number of times someone has said, "I've lost faith in humanity," after watching something like Black Mirror. But we don't really realize that we're probably living in the best time and that humanity as a whole is improving. We're not getting worse, at least, and stats like these strongly suggest that. The best is yet to come, and I think we'll get there. The Better Angels of Our Nature. The best book I've ever read. I've never had something completely change the way I view the world. It puts everything into perspective. The Uplifting News Reddit exists and it still gets content. We should be circulating good news rather than constantly refreshing the bad stuff. Internet forums like Reddit, where a one-line question can pump out 1,000 nice answers ranging from global improvements to cat pictures in 30 minutes. Also, my children and how much they already have it better than I did when I was young, even though I didn't have that many problems back then either. The growing acceptance of people who are different. It might be a long, slow battle, but we're moving in the right direction. Furthermore, people are beginning to realize that we're not all that different. Skin color, eye shape, religious views, and whatever else you have don't make you that different from anyone else. Everyone just varies the norm. It's all kinds of people who make up the world. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Most countries are steadily but surely moving up on the Human Development Index.
This change isn't very noticeable on a day-to-day basis, but over the course of decades, the world is empirically becoming a better place. Not just in Western Europe or in the prosperous bits of China, but in places like sub-Saharan Africa, which is now throwing aside the historical weight of colonialism, civil war, dictatorships, and mass slaughters to grow some really better places for people to live out their lives in. The constant technological advancement we're seeing right now, especially in fields like medicine. I think there's positivity in the fact that we're still allowed to have negative headlines. So far, at least. Whenever there's a grim news story, I always try to remember Mr. Rogers' mother's advice. I look for the helpers. It's a great reminder that people are inherently good, and human ingenuity will get us where we need to go, eventually. My Girl Scout troop. They bring me hope that the future generation gives a crap. I'm 3 months pregnant after the second round of IVF. The fact that my wife and I are going to have a baby together makes me ridiculously optimistic about our future. Mary J. legalization for the USA, which has reduced crime and non-violent offenders in prison, as well as a host of other widespread positive effects. Look, even for someone who's disinterested in Mary J., such as me, this is still a great thing in my opinion, because it's more about personal freedom and much less tax dollars get spent on incarcerating people for a pointless cause. RuneScape Mobile. That one video of a crow and a kitten who are friends? Medical science breakthroughs in Alzheimer's and dementia. Refocusing on space exploration, the future applications of automation and 3D printing, and our increasing ability to share more complex ideas over greater distances in shorter spans of time. Electricity usage is completely flat, and in some areas utilities will sell less electricity than 10 years ago. That's on top of rapidly increasing renewable sources. Well, I'm hopeful that Microsoft will one day bring Clippy back into Microsoft Word. I was born with a very rare muscle illness, and I'm rooting very hard for a cure on a genetic level. That's why I participate in any study that's thrown my way by doctors. Reading headlines on research going into human trials is very exciting and gives me great hope for the future. More people are actually choosing to believe proven sciences. Okay, again, progress since 2018 is unclear. Working with people directly. I noticed a lot of them are good, generous, honest, and benevolent people. These people give me the drive I need to handle things, because I know we can shape a better future for the people, animals, and planet. Also, puppy gifs, or GIFs. Knowledge of the past. Humanity has made more progress towards giving people longer and better quality of life globally in the last 150 years than has occurred in the rest of human history. The growing research around social isolation. Writers and academics like Brené Brown and Sarah Schulman and many more talking about vulnerability and community. I think the more we find places to meet and speak in person, and the more we recognize the limitations of corporatized public spaces like Facebook or Twitter, the more we can disrupt the polarized political discussions and work together and have tough conversations. And a quick plug here for my podcast, Faith Deficit. It's me exploring questions of faith with guests from a variety of faith and non-faith backgrounds. I think we have to talk about these issues together, even if it's hard to do. I am optimistic that the younger generation is more progressive than my father's was. Young people seem to be either more progressive than my generation's progressives or more right-wing than my generation's conservatives. I'm an older millennial, by the way. They seem more polarized and extreme in general. It's quite unsettling. At least they're politically active, I guess. Several nations have pledged to move away from fossil fuels towards renewable alternatives. Even with all the negativity happening in the world, I'm always glad to see the number of people who will stay positive and just try. Try anything. To better themselves, to better their community, to better mankind. Try and fight even though the odds are against them. Even if it's just to let those know who'd hold us down or hold us back, know that we won't stay quiet, that we won't lie down and take it. This is our world, all of us. My family. My students. I'm a high school teacher. They recognize that caring for others is a fundamental component of being part of a community. Our future is in good hands. I'm glad to see this. And yeah, in my brief stints working with children, I always go in expecting the worst, and I come out surprised by how compassionate, emotionally intelligent, and just sharp most of them are. Feels like they're doing way better than I remember most kids my age doing when I was in school. And that's with all the distractions and cheaty resources they have. Still a few monsters out there, though. Dude, frickin' everything. Over the last 200 years, the world has gone from 90% living on $1 a day or less, to 90% living on $1 a day or more. This is in the year 2000 dollars. We haven't had a war between major powers in 70 years. Oh, that one's aged poorly. High-speed internet and 4G cell services is available frickin' everywhere. You can take a cruise around the world for only $2,500. There's an opiate that's 100 times more powerful than smack, and you can buy it on a street corner for $15. The world's completely wonderful right now. Red Dead Redemption comes out on October 23rd of this year. Everyone needs to chill out. Oh, that's easy. The past. People live in this weird bubble of time that seems to them to encompass everything, but in reality it's the tiniest fraction of a drop in the bucket of human society. We really just don't have the good sense of how bad things used to be, even only just a few hundred years ago. For a few examples, look at how upset we get when the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria does something horrible, like burning someone alive or murdering everyone in one place. It's front-page news. It's a huge outrage. But 500 years ago, that was totally normal. It was something that governments did, and on the regular, not just now and then, but as a matter of course. Kill the men and enslave everyone else wasn't seen as barbarous, it was just business as usual. And heck, let's one-up that. 500 years ago, in some parts of the world, motherfrickers were eating each other like it was something to do. There was an entire continent run by massive empires of cannibalistic slaveholders who thought about human sacrifice the way we think about American Idol. We think about how brutal the conquistadors were by our standards, but we should realize that people that they pushed out of power were just as bad as that. We're so much better off than people can possibly comprehend. The world is orders of magnitude safer and gentler than it used to be. I'm really loving the amount of free or highly affordable online education is available. Universities like Yale, Harvard, and many more make full online courses available online for free, complete with notes, quizzes, and complimentary readings. I remember I took a course where you could select a 360 view of the classroom setting. Then there's Udemy, Khan Academy, YouTube channels like Excel is for Fun or Crash Course, even Vox, and about 1 million more sources that provide much more high-quality, engaging content on every topic imaginable. For some reason, it makes me feel hopeful about us all. That Americans help each other in time of crisis. Where there are natural disasters, there are brave people wading into floodwaters to form a human chain. There are people who'll run into a burning building to get everyone out safely. There are people volunteering to search for a missing child. And there are people who'll give you the shirt off their backs. Americans have more in common than we have in conflict. We want our lives in safety without anyone telling us how to live. We want our children to have more opportunities than we had. We want to spend time with our loved ones. Those people who celebrate our victories and prop us up when we can't do it ourselves. We're easily divided by philosophical differences on a broad scale. But on an individual level, Americans help one another. We need to build on that and de-emphasize our differences. Electric vehicles and highly autonomous driving. Cleaner, safer mobility for everyone, including the handicapped, the elderly, and the developing world. Pair this with renewable energy, and things that used to limit us will fade away. Maybe buy one that isn't a Tesla right now, though. How intelligent our younger generation is shaping up to be, whether it be the students protesting or figures like Malala and other children. I think our future is in safe hands. My youngest daughter will be a senior next year. I've never seen a better group of young adults. They're incredibly talented, socially mature, and academically competitive. Most of them will graduate with a 4.0 or above. Social media blew up and offered them a platform when they were in middle school, and the result, despite what my generation seems to think, is a generation of concise and fiercely relevant individuals with more communication skills than any of the generations that have come before. The fact that they can see through the BS and get to the truth gives me hope. We're living in a golden age of astronomy right now, and it's only going to get better every year from here on out with the emergence of giant telescopes and new fields like exoplanetology. This is my absolute favorite topic. I love everything about technology and how it's developing, and consider myself a futurist. Things I look forward to include clean energy, artificial intelligence, the development of virtual reality and augmented reality, people from my generation, I'm 19, growing up to take over in politics, watching Elon Musk embark on his mad scientist adventures, that guy is my role model. Oh, Jesus. Hearing how music is going to evolve, I personally think today's music is alright. Seeing where I end up as a career, seeing who my future wife will be, as I'm constantly looking, I'd like to see where hydroponics goes and how we apply it to current agriculture en masse. Hearing the amazing music I'll be able to produce in 5, 10, maybe even 20 years in the future as I keep progressing along with other people who are also progressing. I can't wait to program huge projects such as massive software that would require huge teams, but be able to direct it. This is just scratching the surface. The future is beautiful, and I just want everyone to look at the incredible technology arriving to us every day. Answers like this and the ideas like this make the world worth living in. Mechanics expose the car brands that you shouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. My father-in-law has a transmission shop, and he says if you buy a Dodge, he'll see around 60k miles and happily take your money. My Dodge Caravan needed its third transmission by 50k miles. Dodge wouldn't fix it under warranty because that expired at exactly 48k miles, even though it was obviously a lemon transmission. I have a 2012 Jeep Grand Cherokee, and it has something seriously wrong with the gas tank and fuel system sensors. I've had it fixed by the dealership, like new gas cap, only to have the problem pop up again like a week later. Browsing Jeep forums has led me to the conclusion that I'll inevitably spend thousands replacing the gas tank, and that may not even fix the problem. I used to be a Jeep fan, but I would tell people to avoid them now. From what I've learned so far in my classes, stay the frick away from Chrysler. I can confirm, 2 days after I brought my 300, the fuel seal was bad and the car stalled every time I stopped the entire way home. Yep, any Chrysler product, especially the Cloud platform. We're talking Stratus, Cirrus, Breeze, or Sebring. Look where the battery is. Any Range Rover, too many issues to list, but the air suspension is notoriously bad. Okay, I'm searching all of these answers for Mazda. Not many results. Whew. The entire reason Mazda was ever associated with poor quality turns out to be because of their appreciation of rotary engines, tanking the brand's reliability figures, since companies like Consumer Reports couldn't mention the RX-7 and RX-8. Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge, Jeep, Range Rover. And you can take my word as an actual shop owner. You don't want to buy these. I knew the overwhelming answer to this would be Chrysler. It amazes me when I see them on the road. Like, who went to a dealership to buy one of those things? It makes no sense to me. A Honda Civic, because you'll still be stuck driving it until it crashes, and new cars are exciting. I can confirm with my 1998 Civic running strong with no oil in it. What? Put some oil in it! Good twist on the answer there. And yeah, why are you driving around a car with no bloody oil, you maniac? Are you desperate for a new car? Hell, I'll take a car with a track record of reliability off your hands. I'm not a mechanic, but my dad is. I've never seen him drive anything other than a Toyota for as long as I can remember. Oof, I'm over here with my 95 DX Honda Civic that my father passed on to me from his drive from Texas to Wisconsin. My biggest problem with it is rust. I mean, you live in Wisconsin. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. The salt will get you eventually. Can you get Alphas where you are? If so, don't. They're the rock stars of the car world. Look pretty, die young. Alfa Romeo make a car as good as a car can be. Very briefly. Dodge. They might look nice, but they are junk. I once asked a tow truck driver about what cars to avoid. He immediately answered, Dodge Durango. I've towed so many of them I can hook one up in the dark. To this day, I remain Durango-free. I haven't seen Subaru on here yet. What's the consensus on them? The 270,000 miles on my Impreza say it's pretty solid. All of my dream cars got knocked out in this group, so I'm guessing sticking with the Subaru. Alright, looks like my next purchase is going to be a Rolls-Royce. Thanks, Internet. I don't know how true this is, but my grandfather told me the story about someone very affluent that had his Royce break down out in the countryside of the US. He knocked on a farmer's door and telephoned the company, which provided immediate service through means of plane, which was unheard of at the time. They basically airdropped in a mechanic to resolve the issue. During the repair time, a waitstaff was brought alone and offered wine and fruit to the driver, and luckily the farmer as well. Upon completion, the service crew left just as quickly as they came. The car owner then wrote a letter to Royce, thanking them for the excellent, speedy service after his breakdown. A letter returned to him much later reading, Dear Mr. X, I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Rolls-Royce just don't break down. Yours faithfully, Henry Royce. Right, I've searched all these answers for Toyota. Good to find out that people love them. My girlfriend and I share an 06 Corolla. It's a little worse for bodywear, with some scratches, missing spaces, but it runs like a dream and never has any problems that aren't inexpensive one-day fixes.
Can we talk about pricing schemes between makes for a moment? One thing Honda, Mazda, and a few of the other Japanese brands have gotten really right that other brands are now copying is how they price their cars. You get 3 to 4 levels of trim or extras on every car, plus maybe a sat-nav option. Otherwise, you pick a color and go. On the other hand, there's Ford and several other American manufacturers where you have everything as an optional extra and it has to be added in various packages. You want disc brakes instead of drum brakes? Oh, you need to add the safety features package that also comes with blind spot monitoring and a backup camera. But what if you don't want the backup camera? Well, too bad. Want a sunroof? You also have to upgrade your sound system and add fog lights in the weather and climate package. Built your favorite loadout? Good luck frickin' finding one exactly like that on the lot. You're going to have to sacrifice some desired features or else pay for ones you don't actually care about if you want that car. F that noise. Frankly, Tesla has the right call by not having dealerships at all and selling directly to customers. But until those laws are changed in the US, the Japanese 3 trim levels only model is way better and lets you at least know what you're paying for without getting raked over the coals by a salesman at the negotiating table for every little nickel and dime extra and customization option. I recently got a Hyundai Ioniq. I chose the mid-level package. Comes with everything I'd ever want. Heated seats, rear camera, active cruise. My father just brought a new BMW 3 Series. He wanted heated seats, but had to tack on a whole load of crap that he didn't want to get them. I had to look at the options and I couldn't keep track of all the packages and what came as a standard and what didn't across the range. I'm sorry, but for $35K, you can put frickin' heated seats in as a standard. It's a joke. The next car I buy will be another Hyundai. It's so much less hassle. Today I learned not to buy a car. Listen, if you want reliability, there's a reason why Civics, Accords, Camrys, and Corollas have been a popular purchase for a long time. They're boring as heck, but damned if they don't stay together. I got a used Camry as my first car as a teenager. I made the mistake of saying I'd wait until it broke down to get a new car. I think I might die of old age before that damn Camry does. Jeep. What a frickin' piece of garbage. Loaded for $75,000. What the frick? One thing I appreciate about Jeep owners is that they're often the first to make Jeep jokes. They know the brand has issues, but they don't care. A refreshing alternative to, say, fans of certain German cars who'll complain that all the statistics are wrong and they're actually a very reliable brand, despite that 4-figure repair at 3 years old. Oh boy, I've had a Volkswagen owner look me dead in the eye and say with a straight face, "Yeah, except for having to replace the transmission under warranty, the car has been perfect." I mean, yeah, technically true, but holy crap. Never buy Chrysler. I've owned over 40 vehicles, mostly purchased used. Every Chrysler gave me issues from the start. Honda Civic was the best car I ever owned. I ran the crap out of it with little to no maintenance, due to its age and mileage. I just planned on running it until it died. It never died, and I eventually sold it for almost what I paid. You go. More like you go nowhere. No, you go, car stays. Good, nobody said Volvo. Nobody said Lada or Trabant either. A Lada might not be luxurious, but holy heck do they keep on going, even when maintenance means hitting the stuck door with a hammer and pulling the twigs out of the fuel filter. Yes, Lada is fine. No need for Western luxurious in fine Soviet car. Sure, it'll make lots of banging and other noises, but Lada is fine. Sometimes it will even make new noise you'll only hear once, and again, Lada is still fine, no need for checking. You crash car into brick wall of garage, with Lada you check on wall, as Lada is indestructible, made from finest stalinium metal forged deep in the gulags of Siberia by the hand of noble peasant workers. Honestly, the Soviet brands are the ones I know absolutely zippy-doo about. Then again, I guess if you're going for the same people who bought us the T-34, then yeah, you're probably expecting something that performs way better than it has any right to, and even though it breaks down, you can just replace the part with your bare hands and some loose seal oil, and get back on your noisy way. Next up, an absolutely heartbreaking indictment of the car I wanted in the future. I'm no mechanic, but never let anyone you love, like, or even don't openly hate buy a Mini. They are absolute junk. Seriously, everyone I know who had one had the same repeating failures as we did, and the internet forums are full of the same reports up to and including burning down their houses. Seriously, they have faulty oil lines that dump oil on hot turbos, and it's well documented that people come home, park their car in the garage, and the car will then burn down the house.
For several years, they were the absolute lowest rated cars on reliability studies, below Fiat, below Chrysler, below Jeep, and honestly, they deserved it. I'm the daughter of a mechanic. Please, whatever you do, don't buy a Mini. One of the most fun cars I've ever driven, but that is where the fun stops. The entire time I owned mine was a traumatic experience. I was hemorrhaging money. Hot Wheels. There's no engine. Ooh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? In short, screw Chrysler, screw Dodge, and screw Jeep. Toyota's pretty good though. I followed this advice all of my life. Then I bought a used Tahoe a few years ago. Within 6 months, it had so many issues I traded it in for a Subaru. I absolutely love it, and I've had 0 issues. So let's add Subaru to the Toyota and Honda recommendations. My family owns a Dodge Nitro. Stuff is breaking on that you didn't even think could break. The frickin' buttons to control the windows are coming off like once a week. They're built like crappy Legos. Okay, move aside, chumps. Actual mechanic here. I've come to the conclusion that everything is junk. However, if you want the least crappy thing, go Toyota or Honda. Don't mess with Nissan. They are the Dodge of Japan. For a truck, I prefer Chevys, but they rot like nobody's business. Main thing you should do is maintain your vehicle. If something minor does malfunction, get it fixed. These things start to pile up, and before you know it, you're driving a death trap. So get whatever you like, but expect to spend money on it. And remember, everyone wants a Wrangler until they own a Wrangler. I still ride on horseback. I don't trust cars.
How much do you think is the brands versus the people taking care of the car?
It is a huge component. I used to work in the industry. People thought that the only maintenance you had to do was put gas in, and then they wondered why their $60,000 car went to crap in a couple of years.
What kind of basic maintenance things should people do with their vehicles?
You should change the oil once a year. Twice a year is better. Go by mileage if you commute a long way, or especially if you sit in traffic a lot. At this time, make sure they change the oil filter and check the air filter as well. Flush the transmission fluid maybe every 2 years. Flush the coolant once every several years, once every 2 years or so if it's an older vehicle. Every year if your vehicle is a little older and you live where you get really hot summers and really cold winters. Replace the spark plugs and coils every 30 to 50,000 miles, or have a trusted mechanic check the gaps for you during your yearly checkup. Resurface the rotors when they get pitted or worn. Change your brake pads before they start to rub. Get an actual car wash or do a thorough job yourself, including the underbody, once a month or so. As part of your checkup with a trusted mechanic, find one of those by the way, have them lubricate wherever there's a fitting, specifically in steering and suspension. Flush your brake lines once every 3 to 4 years. And finally, just don't drive like a lunatic. The only car I'd buy is a 1989 Ford Crown Victoria. It's really all been downhill from there. We rarely get Toyota, Honda, or Nissan in the shop for big repairs unless they have an absurd amount of miles or have been completely ignored their entire lives. Chevy makes some pretty solid trucks and SUVs. Some years did have some lifter problems due to the DoD system. They made for quite an expensive repair, but overall they were still good vehicles. Chevy cars, you should do your research on certain year models. If you're wanting to have cheaper maintenance, avoid most Asian V6s. Some have timing belts that have to be replaced, and can be pretty pricey for every 60 to 90,000. If you already have one of those types of engines, don't ignore this part of the maintenance. It will cost you in the long run when it breaks and trashes your valve train. In short, Honda, Toyota, Nissan, Chevy. Always do your research and stay on top of your maintenance.
I worked for a company that made software for Toyota for a while, and I have a lot more respect for them now. Their quality assurance is absolutely bat crap crazy. Their minimum standard is 99.99996%, if I recall correctly, and that's all the way down through their suppliers. So if you make something for them or something for a company that makes parts for them, you can only have 4 faults in 10 million. They'd also often visit our office and derail tours to sit with several employees of different rank and have the employees show them what they do and how it's done. Nissan did that as well.
Right, I'm a teenager trying to get a license and I'll be moving to New South Wales soon for university. If I manage to get my plates, what's a good car to get as my first one? I need something on the cheaper side and reliable. I also should learn how to take care of the car, but I guess I should figure out how to drive it first.
Toyota. Anything freaking Toyota. I had an early 2000s Corolla as my first car. 4 years of no servicing, and it never died. On the flip side, stay away from Nissan. I upgraded to Navara, and I've spent $3,000 fixing it in the 6 weeks that I've owned it. Honda. My 2007 Accord had both its front and rear badge fall off. I don't even know what kind of car I have because I can only see 3 or 4 other mid-2000 Accords in fine working order on my block. I don't know what horrible management decision led to them using such horrible adhesive, but it should have been made to handle 8 consecutive years in the oppressive Florida sun. Anyway, without the badges, it's completely undrivable. I am never buying Honda again. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. Buy Honda. My father, a mechanic with 38 years of experience, despises German engineering, in particular Volkswagen. He works at a used car lot and would often come home with trademarked fricking VW stories. They are needlessly complex, with so many pieces hidden behind other pieces that trying to fix one can easily become an all-day job. Beyond that, they're ridiculously fragile and break down easily. And then once they do, they have specialty parts that are outrageously overpriced to get. He said the worst part about it all was their popularity. So many VW fanboys would swear by these crappy hell-in-a-handbasket cars, and if it wasn't them, then it was some basic young girl who thought a bug was cute, giving him a never-ending supply of fricking VW stories. He likes Japanese and Korean engineering though. Hyundai is his favorite. My money wouldn't have been on German cars being overhyped. I guess I bought into the international hype that they have. Perhaps they're more fun to drive than they are to work on. Design sculptor here for quite a few years at one of the big OEMs. I know this might sound odd, but reliability and build quality come down to a lot of factors, and every car is subjective to their own problems and flaws. Good brands make bad cars, and bad brands make excellent cars. One thing to understand is in the design and production of a car, a ton has to do with funding for the project and the amount of effort the company wants to put in. That's why a flagship or high-performance car will generally be better build or quality than an econobox. Many companies also toss around engineers from one another. Say, if Ford wants to put a car on the market that competes with BMW, they'll often poach one from BMW or similar companies to bring on those engineers' thought processes on board. Many companies also use the same suppliers as one another, so parts often come from the same place. For example, there's one company here in Detroit that produces most of the badges you see on foreign and domestic cars. A final huge factor on reliability, oddly enough, comes down to the actual assembly process. Oftentimes, recalls are due to poorly installed components and not so much on the technology failing side of things. In the industry, it's known that you want to look at the build date of your car when you're ordering or buying it. I know this sounds funny, but a car built midweek, say Tuesday to Thursday, will generally be better quality and reliability. Why, may you ask? Think of the people building the car. Most are the utmost professionals, but coming into work groggy on a Monday, itching to get out on a Friday, or just plain not wanting to be there on the weekend is going to affect how the person performs their task, sometimes causing faulty component installations and further issues. With all of that said, new cars are generally reliable and built well. We've come a long way and we're improving with every new car. Get what you want. There's a million options and a lot of what is produced today is shared knowledge. Except Chrysler. Don't get anything Chrysler. The Fiat disease has infected them greatly and it shows. In short, reliability is subjective. I've been a shade tree mechanic for years and I'm constantly consulted by friends, family and co-workers about what to buy and what not to buy. I always say no Chrysler, and the only Dodge I'd buy is a police Charger or a truck, and it must have a Hemi engine. The other engine options in a half-ton are trash. And be prepared to be vigilant with maintenance and go into it knowing that at some point you'll need to address a transmission issue. However, other than that, they can be damn reliable and fun, capable vehicles. The only Jeep would be a Wrangler with a manual transmission or an older XJ pre-1999. Despite some claims in these other answers, I'd advise to never ever buy a VW. I've been burned personally by a Passat, and lots of friends and family have been burned as well. Lots of electrical issues and major drivetrain issues. My best friend ignored my advice because he was so enamored with the interior of a VW CC, which is their top-of-the-line luxury sedan. It's needed 2 transmissions in less than 100,000 miles and has developed a serious coolant leak that's being diagnosed right now. He can't trade it in to anyone because of the airbag debacle. He's super upside down on his financing due to this, and the vehicle's resale value has tanked.
It's been a nightmare. Stay away from Volkswagen. Searching for Volvo, 0 results. Damn straight.
I haven't seen Pontiac here. I'm well aware they're not made anymore, by the way. Any thoughts, guys? I drive a 98 Trans Am. It is by far the best car I've ever owned.
My friend has an 07 Grand Prix GXP, 5.3 litres V8, similar to Impala SS, and it was a fairly solid car for the amount of beating it took. Never been a General Motors guy, but I've always wanted to drive a GXP G8 or a Holden Commodore. For the more wealthy, I'm not a mechanic, but a former exotic car salesman. Maseratis are literally held together with paper and glue. As an Italian salesman, I'd slap the roof of the car and tell customers how much frickin' spaghetti you could fit in it. It worked every time. It's funny because Fiat owns Maserati and a lot of the interior parts are used from the Grand Cherokee, so Chrysler strikes again. You won't believe what guests ask for at Disneyland. Theme park employees confess. I work at Disneyland. A kid asked me, "Where's Hogwarts?" I mean, it's probably about a half a day's walk away. Then an adult asked me, "You work during the holidays?" I said yes, and then they muttered as they walked away, "I don't believe her. It's probably a trick to get tips." I mean, it was during Christmas. He was literally there on Christmas. A little kid asked us,
"Yesterday I went to Disneyland and I saw the parade, and it was raining on the parade, and everyone was wearing raincoats, and the Little Mermaid was in the parade, and she was wearing a raincoat too. Why?"
And my coworker smoothly answered, "Well, because everyone else was wearing a raincoat, and Ariel wanted to wear one too so she could be like everyone else." Honestly, it's the adults who are the ones who say the really crazy stuff. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff I'm forgetting and plenty of minor what the frick moments, but one that sticks out in my mind was working at Splash Mountain. The ride broke down and we cast members spread out through the ride to go evacuate people. I got to my area to help, and there was a guy who was absolutely livid that it's not happening fast enough. He's trying to get out of the ride on his own, and I let him know that he needs to stay put and wait for the group. He was also in the heart of the ride building. That thing's like a maze. You find a door and walk out of it, and you might find yourself in frickin' Timbuktu. Starting an evacuation takes maybe 10 minutes or so to get rolling, maybe 20 if we've just tried to restart the ride first, although usually we know right away if it's an evacuation. So it's a bit annoying, maybe at the most, but you'd think it was the end of the world for this guy. He was ranting and yelling, and I'm trying to calmly tell him to stay seated until we get to his log. We get the guests out of the logs behind him, standard operating procedure being to start with the back log in the section and work your way forwards to the first. And when we get to his log, he starts ranting about how he peed his pants in the meantime, gesturing at a wet spot on his trousers. The guests in the log behind him, however, who were very visibly sick of this guy, leaned in and said, "He absolutely didn't pee himself. We saw him splash the water on himself to make it look like he did." The guy was such a jerk that strangers around him were selling him out. We did manage to finally get everyone out, and I absolutely did not give him anything to placate him like I would with any other guest that's had something go wrong, other than the free fast pass that we had to give him because everyone gets one when a ride breaks down. Enjoy walking around the park with your wet crotch, buddy. I, for one, am not at all surprised that all of the worst interactions come from adults. Like, kids might not understand the rules, and some might even deliberately break them, but far fewer of those little crap bags will have the audacity to blame it on the employees or try to get people fired.
"Why do you work here?"
That kid made me think very deeply, and I don't even know why. My daughter was 2 or 3 when we went to go and see Elsa and Anna. A 4-hour line of which my daughter would shuffle forward whenever it would move, and then lie down and sleep on the floor when it didn't. Finally, it was our turn. We walked into the room and there's Elsa and Anna. First question my daughter asks them was, "Do you brush your teeth?" And then after the thing was done and we were leaving, my daughter casually tells me that it wasn't really Elsa or Anna. The real ones were probably busy. We waited 4 hours in that line, man. I was a bus driver at the park, so it wasn't the kids, but the adults. They'd see the turn signals come on, but not me taking my hands off the steering wheel, and they'd ask how I was turning them on. Magic. And for those of you who don't know, there are 2 foot buttons on the floor you push with your left foot.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm an adult and I'd be fascinated by that as well.
Kid asked me for a high five, so I put out my hand to do it. They then went to do the slap, stopped, glared at me and walked away. That kid couldn't have been older than 8. I started 2 months ago and my job doesn't have much guest interaction, but I did have one kid who kept asking me where the characters were. He asked where Bugs Bunny and the rest of the Looney Tunes were, and I blew his mind when I told them they work at Six Flags with Batman and Superman, not at Disney. When I was around 3 or 4 on a family trip to Disney World, I drew a picture of my plane crashing on the way to Orlando and my family falling to a fiery death, and then I gave it to Mickey Mouse. I wonder what the guy inside the costume thought. I wouldn't be surprised if he still had that. Yeah, actually, nothing would make me happier. My question came not from the child, but a mother with her 2 kids in tow. How do they work? Are they animatronic or do you have remote control? She was talking about the live wild manatees. And then she threatened a lawsuit on Disney for endangering her kids near manatees, the gentlest of sea creatures, giant, slow-moving potatoes. This was for a kayaking trip off-site. The Disney cast members shuttled the guests in a bus to our location about 30 minutes away. I don't work for Disney directly, I run a kayaking business that Disney subcontracts for their kayaking trips. The kids were always kind, and the questions they asked 90% of the time was, "Where's the bathroom?" The adults are the ones who forget how to act like normal, decent people. I've had more than a handful of fully grown adults approach me while I was restocking stuff in the confectionery, and they'd point to the stuff in my hands that I was actively putting up and being 100% serious ask me, "Is that free?" The worst, though, was on my first day working Main Street in Magic Kingdom. Rope drop had only just happened, and I already had a dad in my face demanding to know where the adult beverages were. Mind you, this was in 2017 when Magic Kingdom was still a dry park. When I informed him that it was a dry park, he lost it on me, screaming questions at me like, "How am I supposed to deal with my kids all day?" Had I been off the clock, I would have responded with therapy. I used to be a pirate that did the pirate makeovers in Magic Kingdom, and I had a little boy, probably around 7, in my chair. We were talking about how I live on a pirate ship, of course, and what kind of pirate ship he'd want to live on. He asked, very concerned, "How do you take a shower on a pirate ship?" And I said, "We don't, ha-ha." Then my pirate coworker next to me came and smelled my armpit and confirmed that we absolutely didn't. Then in return, I smelled her armpit to let him know that she also hasn't showered. He didn't ask any more questions after that. Oh my god, this kid went home and his parents couldn't get him to shower for a week because he learned that real pirates don't shower. That's hilarious. I'm aware that I probably caused some difficult situations when these kids get back home, all in a day's life of child entertainment. I have another great one too. This one happened to my friend, not me personally, but it's still funny to share. My pirate friend had a 5-ish-year-old boy in her chair doing the same pirate ship routine when this sweet boy says, "I think my house is haunted." And my friend carries on asking why he thought that, and he told her that, "Sometimes at night, I go to my mom and dad's room and I hear a ghost moaning." I was at the station next to her, and it took every ounce of self-control to not burst out laughing. Luckily, the mum was just far away enough not to hear it. I am the strange child in this story. I went to Disneyland back in 2000 or so. I was about 5 or 6, and my first pet goldfish had died shortly before we went on our trip. We went to Minnie's house, and I got to meet her at the end for pictures. I remember there being some cool animatronic goldfish bowl in her house, so I had to tell her how sad I was that my fish had just died, and my mum made me flush him down the toilet. Of course, the actors aren't allowed to talk, so this poor soul playing Minnie had to watch 5-year-old me sobbing for my lost pet fishy and wasn't able to say anything. That Minnie Mouse actor gave me the most heartfelt, warm, sincere hug I've ever had in my life. Shout out to all the Disney park actors who've ever consoled a crying child. I assure you, you made it better. Kids never usually ask weird questions, it's always the parents who ask the strangest things like, "Where can I buy Lumpy?" And when we answered, "I'm sorry, I didn't know this obscure Winnie the Pooh character, and yeah, we don't have that, sorry," the lady gets mad. Surprise! At the zoo, "Why does that elephant have 5 legs?" The rhinos were ensuring the survival of their species when we visited. "Not very good at leapfrog," was how the cast member had to put it. So my aunt took me to the zoo when I was like 6. We were on this little train and it passed by the area with horses. I saw this horse there and was like, "Is that horse pooping? That's really long." And then it dawned on me. That's its pecker. That thing is huge. How does it walk around with that thing swinging around all the time? I was apparently uncharacteristically loud, and all my aunt could do was try to shut me up and hope for the sweet release of death. To be fair though, that horse was like the Ron Jeremy of horses. It damn near touched the ground. Frankly, I do not understand how any of these workers don't fully lose it in front of everyone, because I'm not sure I could hold a straight face if my life depended on it. Finally, my time to shine. I work in Hollywood studios in Walt Disney World, and I've heard some pretty weird ones. I won't say the name of my store, but if you know Walt Disney World, you'll be able to guess pretty easily. When building lightsabers, I've had multiple young kids ask me very genuinely questions about how I think their lightsaber will look in battle, or how much destruction they're going to cause. It's usually pretty light-hearted and funny, but once I had the sweetest little girl come through my lightsaber station, and at the very end, when we'd finished her saber, she very thoughtfully informed me, "Yeah, I'm gonna stab my brother." The majority of the questions I answer are related to Galaxy's Edge. I get asked about 4,000 times a day where we build the fancy lightsabers, or where we build the droids, or is this Rise of the Resistance? Where do I get the colored milk? You get used to them all pretty fast. We have a Jedi Stitch up on the shelf behind the counter. I have to tell 1,000 people a day that we can't sell him because he's a fellow cast member. Last week, we gave Stitch a little plastic lightsaber keychain, and a kid asked very nicely, "Has Stitch ever killed anybody with that?" Although my favorite guest interaction was with an older, middle-aged woman, not a child. This lady came in, walked up to the counter, and I was assuming she was going to ask me for directions or something else. Instead, she asked me, "Has anyone ever told you that you have the body language of a Muppet?" And then immediately left the store without another word. I have plenty more stories, but that one will stick with me forever. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? This child didn't ask me the question, but I present the most absolutely nutso conversation I heard during my time at the Disney Boardwalk.
"Nana, can we go on the jet skis again like last time?"
And her 50-something Eastern European grandma answered, "No, it's not safe. Your mother not right in the head, you understand? Is mental ill. She go fast like on American freeway. Even if I tell her stop, she not know to stop. Will overturn and you will drown."
"Oh, can I please have some ice cream?"
"No, we'll make fat and kill you." He didn't say anything, but I did walk up on a kid just licking the pavement at a market in Magic Kingdom. I was bringing a whole container of turkey legs, but the kid seemed much more interested in that concrete. It's generally not the kids that ask weird things, it's the adults. Let's see. First, while during the post-parade exodus in a jam-packed store that sold only hats, I was asked, "Where are your spoons?" Then there was, "Can I stand on the railing?" Alright, I'm just going to start listing them off rapid fire. "What do you mean I can't take my shirt off?" "What time's the 3 o'clock parade?" "Can you stop the parade so I can cross the street?" That was the only time I grabbed a guest as she was about to dart out in front of a giant parade float. "Yo, which princess has the biggest rack?" And the answer was Aurora, followed by Jasmine.
"I can't get out. How do I leave?"
"Am I allowed to watch the fireworks?"
"Oh, good God, I need me a turkey leg. Where are they, honey? Mama's hungry."
This was at 9 a.m., but you do you, lady. And finally, "I paid for this ticket. I want this thing 50% off." And when told no, the lady grabbed said thing and ran out of the store. From a cast member on TikTok, apparently multiple people left their fully packed luggage at their home, got to the airport, flew to Orlando, then expected the Magic Express bus to take their luggage from their house to Disney World. Grown adults did this. It was even more common for people not to get their bags from baggage claim or take them off the plane because they thought Disney would do that as well. I work with the horses at the park, and I had a child ask why the horse had a butthole. Not a cast member, but I did have a little kid ask me if I was his dad in front of Thunder Mountain. He decided that my husband and I were his new parents, so he sat down between us and asked if he could have a bite of my husband's Mickey pretzel. My husband distracted him with said pretzel while I grabbed a cast member to claim a lost child. Cast member told the kid that he knew where his real parents were at. The poor kid started crying because he didn't listen to his mum by not having his hand on the stroller and was running ahead of his family. His thought process seems pretty interesting. He didn't do what his mum said, and as a result he got lost, so he thought, well, I guess I have to find a new family now.
If Goofy's a dog, why does he have a pet dog himself?
Why is the music so loud? Or sometimes,
why does Princess X, Y, or Z look like that?
As they sob. I did that last one when I was a child. For whatever reason, Princess Aurora scared the heck out of me. Most kids don't really ask weird or unexpected questions. That's usually their parents or the really obsessed Disney adults. The weirdest questions I got were usually about Baby Yoda, especially when he wasn't yet in stock anywhere. Not a cast member, but I went to Disney one year with my family. It was in November, so it was cooler weather. I was wearing a blue fleece vest that had a little Winnie the Pooh emblem on it, and I spent most of my day answering questions from people because they thought I worked there. Luckily, I'd been to Disneyland enough that there weren't too many questions I didn't know. I'd just finished telling some lady how to get a ride while we were waiting to get popcorn from the carts when an actual cast member told me that I should work there. I laughed and said, "Can I get paid for today?" And she laughed and said, "Sure," and gave me one of the souvenir containers full of popcorn for free. I thought it was a fair day's pay. I love Disney popcorn. I worked at Disney as a ticket taker and bag checker. Little boy asked me if I was magical because his grandma told him Disneyland was a magical place. Had numerous kids rub my skin because, according to their parents, they've never seen a black person before. People touching you without your permission was one of the worst things about that job. My favorite story was this girl leaving the park and wanted to know how Mickey could just finish Fantasmic but be on Main Street with completely different clothes. Her mind was blown, hands on her head, just trying to comprehend how he could be in two places at once. I told her that he has a bunch of underground tunnels so that he could avoid the crowds and get to the front to say goodbye. She was satisfied with that answer. Wait, I thought we'd established in a previous video about Disneyland that there actually are a network of crazy underground tunnels in Disney World. So it was barely a lie. But also, the answer magic was right there if you needed it. It's right there in Disneyland's slogan, isn't it? I was selling snacks at Hollywood Studios and some kid asked me, "What does the fox say?" I was not up on the memes or the internet, nor did I have a smartphone to check on things during my breaks. Once in Tokyo Disneyland, I asked a staff member, "How's your day been going?" And he immediately went somewhere and bought a jar of pickles with him and gave it to me. I was so confused, so I asked him, and he told me it's a tradition in Disneyland that when someone asks you how your day's been going, they give them a free jar of pickles. People who work in Disneyland, please confirm, because if it's true, I've never found it on the internet. I worked at Disney World and we didn't give away pickles. It could be a magical moment, one of those things you do randomly for people that makes them feel special, even though we did them every hour and kept a logbook about it. While at 1900 Park Fair, Drizella Tremaine was asked by her father if she wanted to go back to the hotel room for a menage of 3 with his wife, in front of his family. If looks could kill, he'd have been dead. That wife was not happy. Drizella removed herself from the situation to go to the next table, and the family was gone not too long after that. I worked as a character. This time I was working a resort doing meet and greets. She was the last kid in my shift, and I said hi to a Make-A-Wish Foundation girl wearing a mini dress and matching bandana, and asked me, "Will you be in heaven when I die?" All I could do was nod my head because fur characters aren't supposed to talk. I gave her a big hug and went backstage, took off my costume and had a big, bawling eyes cry in the bathroom. I was on the scientific dive team at the Living Seas in Epcot in the 90s. One of the most awkward moments for me was while doing guest interactions at the Coral Reef restaurant. We'd send some of the team to talk to guests at the restaurant, answer questions and stuff. I was talking with one family when the male turtle came down and mounted the female turtle right in front of the window. The kids, between 6 and 10, asked me what they were doing. I deferred that question to their parents. I worked at Disneyland for 13 years. It was actually a wonderful experience. I do remember one fun interaction. The guest asked, "Where can I find ears?" On the side of your head?" His family burst out in laughter and started giving me high fives. I was asked to keep daddy and only let mummy leave. Looking at the parents, the dad seemed like a real jerk. I felt bad for the day after that. My daughter asked this and we have it on video. At Disneyland, where they have the Ask Crush interactive thing, I can't remember the actual name, with lots of kids and parents in the crowd, this crush asked if she had a question, and she proceeded to ask, "What's your favorite math equation?" To which the crowd of parents all started cracking up. But the kicker was his genius reply. He said it was 1 + 1 = 3 because it's the equation for family. That guy nailed it. The morning that Disney Channel actor Cameron Boyce passed away, us workers were all pretty somber about it. We had all of his movie merchandise all over and the movie songs playing, so he knew how to treat the subject delicately. Within the first hour, some girl comes up to me and just asks, "He died. You know how he died?" I tried to brush her away, but I ended up being told and asked about his passing by 4 or 5 kids that uncomfortable morning. A grown man who interrogated me and asked why the sodas were so expensive and then demanded I tell my manager to lower the prices. Then he asked if I buy sodas when I go to the parks. Like, "Sir, I'm on the college program, I make $11 an hour. You think I set the prices?" I once got stuck in the Pirates water ride, and as it was nearing the end of the ride, by where the pirate was singing, yo ho, the pirate's life for me," our ride got stuck. We thought they'd fix it soon, but as it was becoming apparent to us that it wasn't getting fixed 10 minutes into the maintenance, me and my brothers were getting sick of listening to that pirate's life on repeat. I yelled in frustration, "At least turn off the damn music," not even expecting anything. Little did I know that a cast member was listening and the song was shut off for the remainder of the maintenance. I was working newsstand, which is the store that is both inside and outside of the park, and a Chinese gentleman asked me if there was anything made here not made in China, because he could get all of this stuff back home. "Why does this sandwich taste like mouse?" "So, how does it feel being a rat?" asked a kid. I used to work at 2 thrill attractions and I'd always get, "Am I gonna die?" And I'd say, "Well, someday, kid, someday, but not on this ride." Every single afternoon I'd get a genuine, "What time is the 3 o'clock parade?" It was hard telling them the time that it was at without sounding like a complete jerk. I'll say the weirdest requests I got while working there were from quirky Disney adults who were a bit too into the parks. Case in point, there was an annual pass holder who visited Magic Kingdom at a minimum twice weekly with her very young daughters, approximately 4 and 7 years old. The woman treated her children like dolls. She's made them exact replicas of 98% of Magic Kingdom's costumes cast members. One day, her youngest's costume matched mine and the mum requested a photo. I obliged because that's what Disney wanted us to do. Literally 30 seconds after she snapped the picture, the mum began complaining that her daughter really wanted a replica of the standard Main Street USA costume. The only issue was she just couldn't find the exact skirt fabric despite looking for years. Before I knew it, this woman was telling me, a total fricking stranger, to steal a Main Street ensemble from costuming so that her daughter's whole summer wouldn't be ruined. I am just floored by the audacity, to be honest. One meeting away from going postal. If you've ever had these thoughts, you're not alone. I had the urge to quit. And I will, but it'll be called retiring when I do it. I had that strong urge today when I realized that I hadn't been provided a very key piece of information that I needed after working on a horribly tedious project for 3 days. I had to scrap the whole thing and start over. For a moment, I thought about just walking away from my job, my life, everything, just getting in the car and driving until I ran out of gas. I've never been in a fight, like a full-on fist fight, just wondering how much I could give or take. But I don't want to be broken afterwards, so I probably won't ever act on it. I feel like this might be more common than I think, but I sometimes really want to know what it would feel like to feel extreme pain, but to not have it last. I want to know what my pain would be like if I shanked myself, but I don't want it to cause lasting damage. You know what I want to do? I want to scream at work. If you work in a restaurant, go into the walk-in and just scream there. It helps. In fact, a walk-in cooler is probably the best workplace mental health service. Thick metal walls to muffle the outbursts, cold temperatures to cool you down. It keeps you from hanging around too long and dwelling on it, and you're typically alone in there. When I'm filling my car up, I sometimes get an urge to pour a ton of petrol on myself or somebody else. I just kind of want to see what would happen. I also dig the smell. Oh, and also, I've wanted to slap my mother-in-law about 50 times since Christmas. Whenever I'm working and someone is just physically close to me, a little voice pops into my head saying, "They're so close, you could just kiss them." But then my brain comes back to reality and I'd realize that I have no desire to kiss my bio partner or teacher, but they're so close that I could. And then on the same note, I also sometimes get the urge to slap people. I'm talking to someone and just feel like beating them across the face. They're so close, I could just do it and they'd never have time to flinch. Of course, I don't actually slap people across the face. To drop everything and live in the wilderness. Sometimes civilization is just too much. I too have been indoctrinated by years of nature survival shows and crafting games to believe that I'd have a shot in hell of being okay if I just tried to make it on my own out in the bush. But at least part of my brain is rational enough to believe that I'd die of exposure in less than a week. Also, have you watched Primitive Technology? Making your own tools takes ages. My screen-addled brain does not have the attention span for that. I'm not a bear, but I've got to resist the urge to eat all of the salmon behind the seafood counter at the grocery store. When something is so cute, you just want to squeeze the devil out of it. For me, it feels like some sort of overwhelming emotion that's so immense for you to handle and contain, so you're at a point where you don't know what to do with it, and to release this kind of stress, kind of like a stress ball, you displace it to squeezing the thing that's causing it. That's an actual thing called cute aggression. Basically, something is so cute we don't know what to do with it, so we want to kill it. It's messed up, but it is what it is. Alcoholic here. Alcohol still feels like the solution to all of my problems. I've found myself turning into the liquor store parking lot without even thinking. I think I'll always feel this way no matter how long I go without a drink. Every time I stand over the bins of apples in a grocery store, I wonder how many people I could hit with a decent throwing arm before somebody stopped me. I've never had this urge, at least not until now. Now I'm never not going to think about this at the grocery store. Every time I look over the railing, I imagine what it would be like to jump off. And no, I don't have any major mental health problems or desire to not be alive anymore otherwise. Mine isn't myself going over, but for some reason, if my keys are in my hand, I have to fight not to throw them over. It makes no sense. I get the same way with my keys near storm drains. As soon as I pass by one with my keys out, I instantly think, I could throw those down there. I really want to take a bite out of the deli meats at the store, but I think an entire one would cost way too much. If somebody's walking very slowly in front of me, I want to kick their foot and trip them so bad. When people stand by ledges or at the top of stairs and I feel like pushing them down, it's so tempting. I'm a recovering opiate addict. I've been clean for almost a decade. The thing about addiction is it never really goes away. I still get the urge all the time, but I've learned to control it. Even if I get around certain friends that feel like they must absolutely get me to eat a Percocet or something, I'm easily able to say no, but the urge will always be there. Quit school and just live at my parents' house until my money runs out and just die from starvation or something. I blame the Assassin's Creed series for making me see climbable buildings and gappable ledges and making me wonder if I could clear it or climb it. Spoilers, I could not. If you're a reasonable weight and go to the gym once or twice a week, you probably could. Once. But if you stay fat, you could jump off the building and assassinate someone. Once. Stand up at work and loudly announce, "I'm going for a crap," before walking out of the office. And yes, I'm aware that being Scottish makes this far, far funnier to some of you. When hugging small children or animals, I always can't help but wonder if I'm strong enough to just, crush them. I'm not going to test it out, though. When I'm driving, I often get the urge to just swerve into oncoming traffic. I haven't got a clue why. My coworker has the most endearing and beautiful smile I've ever seen. I want him to know that, but I'm certainly not going to be the one to tell him. And sorry, I forgot context. I have a massive crush on him. I don't know how to tell him the smile thing without making it more obvious than it already is. Move to a new city somewhere in the world and start a new life. I did this with surprisingly little planning and having never visited the city I chose. It worked out amazingly, and while I know it's not for everyone, if you have relatively little to lose and can bail out back home, I suggest trying it. I did it. Got lonely, didn't fit in well in a place where I didn't grow up. I ended up lonely as ever, and when I moved back, I was so much happier. Maybe what you need is a break. It wasn't like that for me, but it ended up like that for me. It helped a lot. You know those really annoying things in the mall running around and their parents don't care? Forearm smash. Take them out. Boom. That or grab them and toot in their little faces. To just rip my clothes off wherever I am in the world. To just vanish. To withdraw all of my money, get in my car and drive until I don't feel like driving anymore. It would be like hitting reset on my life. Young man, there are leaves all around, I said, young man. Eat a leaf off the ground, I said, young man. Won't they make a cool sound when you stuff them in your leaf hole? Thank you for making me sing yet again, Internet. Picking up one of those 4 packs of muffins in the grocery store, opening it up and just punching the frick out of them. Really give them the business. Crumbs scattering everywhere while I laugh like a lunatic pulverizing those motherfrickers. Sometimes I giggle walking through the bakery thinking about it. I just legitimately hate those giant muffins. Big spongy jerks usurping the real ones. And don't get me started on those motherfrickers with the soft cream cheese stool pooped right into the center. I want to do that with literally everything I ever see in a bakery. Honestly though, given that it sounds like there are other people who have similar urges, those glass cabinets seem to be all that stands between us and utter anarchy. Murder. It's always murder. I work at a nationally known pickle company in packaging. Over the last 6 months, every once in a while I get an urge to stick my Johnson in the pickle slicer. I'm not sure why, but the impulse is getting stronger. I never will though. I mean, he's a married man for God's sake. Beatboxing or singing all of my words while ordering food. Taking my seatbelt off and hitting the e-brake while on the highway and letting Jesus take the wheel. To literally just ram my cart into the jerks that stop in the middle of the aisle in grocery stores. I used to daydream about sitting in my car in the garage with the engine running. It seemed like one of the less painful ways to off yourself. I don't have that garage anymore though. It absolutely isn't a pleasant way to off yourself, by the way. Both CO and CO2 inhalation trigger an asphyxiation reflex that includes a violent panic attack and thrashing. I won't elaborate further because I don't want to give anyone ideas, but gas self-deletion is a complex process and easily botched. After class today, I was talking to classmates in the hallway and I had a sudden urge to bite down as hard as I could on the concrete pillar on the wall. I couldn't get the thought out of my mind until after I left. I didn't miss lunch today, so I was a little hungry, but I don't think I'm iron deficient. The thought was less about eating and more about the actual act of biting concrete and what that would feel like for my teeth. Anyone else get the weird urge to just kiss whoever you're talking to, regardless of their gender or attractiveness? Almost like I could kiss you. What would occur as a result of that, I wonder, sort of urge. It's really off-putting at times. I hope it's not just me. Intrusive thoughts / the call of the void. Anytime I go to a church, I always get the biggest urge to stand up and yell out something or scream at the top of my lungs. It always happened during the sermon. There's a troll in the dungeon! Casually cutting down all the trees in my neighbor's yard so they fall on his house. He's a rotten human being who's kicked my cat because she peed on one of his trees. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Exhibitionism. As a high schooler, I'd go hiking out by these dried up riverbanks. Wide open areas of loose stone scattered with valleys and hills and small groves of trees. In the distance, less than 200 yards away, there was this neighborhood isolated by this wall, but all the second-story windows had a great view of the area. Long story short, the exhibitionist spirit hit me one day while I was hiking, so I ripped off my clothes and spent the rest of the day undressed. No one anywhere near me, but for all I know, 200 people could have been watching from their windows. What fun! The urge to just turn off my social filter and say exactly what I feel, each and every other person around me needs to know. I regularly have to stifle the want to just freak the F out on strangers for a variety of reasons. One of the things I've started doing is turning this filter off for positive things. If I see someone wearing a shirt I like, I'll let them know. A few weeks ago, I saw a guy with a motorcycle helmet that was painted to look like the Rebel pilot's helmet from Star Wars. You know damn well that I rolled down my window to holler at him and tell him that was awesome. My brother thinks it's weird, and yes it is, but I probably won't see most of these people again. So if they feel weird, it's no skin off my back. But if it makes them smile, it's totally worth it. Starting a massive brawl in the middle of a bunch of people. Driving my car into a ditch or a guardrail tree at high speeds. I've had intrusive thoughts about pummeling my boss with a metal rod or crowbar. I don't even dislike him. I read crowbar as coworker, and I imagined you just picking up the nearest guy and beating the ever-loving fudge out of your boss with them. Happily married guy here who gets the urge to rail other chicks all the time. And I never will. For those suggesting I talk to her about it and see if she'd be okay with it, no. I don't really want to be unfaithful and frankly wouldn't in a million years want to be with a woman who would be okay with it. I just want to literally curl up into a ball and roll down the stairs. Will I turn the corners or will my head go through the wall? To leave my daycare classroom mid-shift to use the bathroom without finding another staff member to watch the children. I know it's super lame compared to some of these other responses, but sometimes I really don't want to call half the building just so I can take a whiz. Sure, I'd love to do a reset on life by running away or stealing something of value, but being able to just go pee whenever you need to, that's underrated, man. When I was taking photography classes in community college, there was this one kid in every class I took who never shut up. I envisioned pelting him in the back of the head with baby carrots every time he spoke. I have no clue why baby carrots in particular, it just seemed like it would have been satisfying. I would love to ask someone I'm helping at work, how are you still alive being as freaking dumb and worthless as you are? Every day. Every single day. Punching people in the face. Yep, most of us inflict our random need for violence in the streets of open-world games. So thank you, Bethesda, Rockstar, and CD Projekt. None of those hundreds of civilians and hard-working guards or policemen I killed died in vain. They gave me a cheap laugh before I reloaded my save and subjected them to painful deaths all over again. Knock somebody off the road when they change lanes into me really quickly without even using their blinkers. I'm sick of slamming on my brakes or swerving lanes to dodge these idiots who don't check their blind spots. If they're not going to drive safe, then maybe they deserve an accident. No, I don't act on these urges, but boy, I really want to. Many times when I'm in a construction zone, I really just want to walk up and hit the pylons. Doing the deed with a bunch of random strangers. I'm not that attracted to random strangers enough for it to actually happen, though. To just attack someone near me for no reason at all. To kick small children when they're screaming in public places. Submit in certain inappropriate places with inappropriate people. I really have a thing for professors. What if, when I was having a heated argument, I just beat the crap out of the other person, even someone half my size? I've been in a fight when pushed or punched, but disagreeing with someone is no reason to become physical. But the thought of it does intrude sometimes. Steal a really fast car and cruise along the highway at top speed. The urge to build the largest outdoor amphitheater in the world in order to follow my dreams of playing the lead in a hit musical. But I can't find anyone to fund this project on such a large stage, so sadly I will never act upon it. The call of the void. Screwing the guy who considers me his best friend. He's in a relationship, by the way, so that's a good reason not to. Hey cousin, you want to go bowling? The urge to tell my grandmother to shut the F up when she goes on one of her long-winded rants. Discovering my true potential. Motorboat women with fantastic chests. I've got the same thing, but with butts. I constantly get the urge to travel, though I can rarely act upon it. I just love road trips, the freedom of going new places with the safe confinement of the vehicle, staring at the roads and the scenery, going to little side markets, gas stations late at night, seeing bright city lights, the people around you that can have completely different lifestyles than the ones from back home, observing their new habits. The air is always different each time you leave the car, and the feeling of elation when you arrive at new places is so gratifying. I just love it. I have this urge inside of me where I picture myself satisfyingly murdering someone and taking them down, particularly someone I dislike. I know I probably won't ever murder anyone, but I always think about it. To take off all my clothes, like just sit outside a coffee shop reading, cup in hand, exposed as a jaybird. I'd love to see how long it would take before I'm in handcuffs. How long would people be willing to ignore it just to keep the peace or not get involved? It's part of something I always say to myself. You technically have the ability to do anything you desire, just perhaps not for very long. I work 911 dispatch. So many times I want to tell people to either A, shut the F up and listen, I'm trying to help you, or B, grow the F up and handle your own crap, because their girlfriend took their iPod or some stupid crap like that. The urge to get my crap together, but that'll never happen. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, sometimes I just want to slam on the gas, bulldoze right into them, drag them out the driver's window, and then hurl a Molotov cocktail into their car. Not being alive anymore. I don't have those tendencies anymore, but I still wonder what would happen if I just ceased to exist, you know? Also, when I was a kid in the car with my parents while holding a stuffed animal or toy, I'd often get the urge to just, throw it out the window, even if I loved that toy. I never did, but it distressed me quite a lot. I frequently feel like pooping and then just putting it back in. I don't even think it would work. I hate this. This is my life. Talking to the cute girl because I'm extremely shy and have horrible social anxiety. I'm pretty sure I'm in love with one of my best friend's wives. She checks all the right boxes and is also one of my best friends. I fantasize her pretty much every day physically and emotionally. I can never, ever say anything about it to anyone or act on anything. However, there are times where I just want to hug her and not let her go, and there are times where I just want to rip off all of her clothes and just take her right there. And yes, I am seeing a therapist about it. Walk out on my job. Every single time I'm stopped first in line at a red light and pedestrians are on the crosswalk, I want to honk and scare the crap out of them just so I can get a good chuckle. I get it. I also know that if someone did that to me and I was in a bad enough mood, after I'd jumped 6 feet in the air, I'd probably just stand there and stare at them until long after the light was green again. The pit maneuver to the car in front of me. Just to see if it actually works. Just drive into everything I see at top speed. I think it might be a side effect of a mixture of video games. I highly recommend beamng.drive on Steam. The best crash simulator I've ever played. I've put in easily a dozen hours, not even doing the challenges, just crashing into stuff. Good game. Putting a sticky note on someone's car saying it was hit with a fake number, ruining their day as they look for the scratch or bump that isn't there to begin with. Yeeting a baby. The baby will never forget the day he was yoten. When I see cute babies, I want to bite them. Murder. Doing it with like every attractive person I see. I'm in a happy monogamous relationship, so I'd never cheat on him, but fudge it if I don't fantasize about every hot guy or girl that I see. I think I might have a condition, honestly. To suck one. I'm a straight married man with no attraction to any other men, but sometimes I get the urge to suck a big old male member. I bet I could teach my wife a thing or two as well. Taking off my shoe and throwing it at anyone annoying me, especially as they walk away, or pushing someone off a bicycle. I can't explain the urge. Probably slapping my daughter. She's 14 and acts so manipulative and crappy all the time, and then tries to make me feel bad for, quote, not including her. She's just like her father, my ex, and I just want to grab her by the shoulder and shake her and slap her and tell her that she's ruining her life by acting this way. Horrible, horrible violence to literally anyone. Grabbing somebody who's being crappy by the back of their head and tooting directly into their face. I get these all the time, random impulses out of nowhere that I have to shake off. Some days, it's punching co-workers who neglect our job, especially since we're caretakers. Other times, wanting to grab a hot stranger and go bump uglies if you're picking up what I'm putting down. On good days, wanting to blow money and buy a well-behaved child a toy they like at the store. And, more than I like to admit, dress up like a barbarian and run around making battle cries, hiding in a bush and throwing fake or foam rocks at those passing by. Non-emergency. More like life or death. Patients who were way too chill on the phone. I had a guy tell me he was on his way to the ER and asked if we had a wheelchair waiting for him because he thinks he'll pass out as soon as he shows up. Turns out he cut his hand clean off and was driving one-handed, bleeding all over the place to the ER. The guy even picked up his hand and put it in his jacket pocket. I used to work for the 111 service, which is supposed to be non-emergency. The most memorable one was when a guy's wife just fell asleep. Yeah, when we turned up, she was dead. One was a guy whose mum called us as she had some concerns for her son's mental health. Gives me her daughter-in-law's number, so I give her a call. All I hear is, "He's got a knife, please, my baby!" And the call cuts out. Everything turned out relatively fine according to the call notes though. A call from a phone box, from a guy saying he was taking some substances, which ones he wouldn't say. He was doing them with his friend, who had then taken too many and started foaming at the mouth and went a funny color. So the guy, quote, ran away, and I asked when this occurred, to which he responded, "About 15 minutes ago." I never found out what the specific outcome was, but let's be honest. Plenty of strokes, heart attacks, kids drinking bleach, basically anything and everything you could imagine. You'd be calmly asking questions while frantically gesturing the universal phrase for, "Why the frick are you calling us?" I also once got a call on a Sunday afternoon that went like this. My wife's taken a bit of a funny turn. Maybe 7 out of 10 times I heard this phrase that ends up being some kind of common stroke symptom. Yeah, she's been complaining that her arm went numb and she started slurring her speech. She's been feeling dizzy and complaining of a really bad headache. We didn't call anyone because it was the weekend, but it's got a lot worse. Okay, when did the symptoms begin? Friday afternoon. One of my instructors in AITA told us a story about how they were responding to a call where the patient was complaining about chest pain. For obvious reasons, he and the other EMTs were preparing for some sort of cardiac issue. They got to the scene just to find out that the patient's chest pain was due to the firearm wound in his chest. It doesn't technically fit your criteria, since chest pain is also an emergency, but I figured it fit well enough. Do you think he had a good think about whether to even call the emergency services about the bullet lodged in his sternum? Or did he take a couple of ibuprofen and see if it mellowed out for a few hours? My goodness, that is the definition of a symptom that you want to disclose on the phone. My neighbor was a well-known handyman and tough guy, and one day while fixing a hole in his roof midday from a recent storm, he slipped and fell 2 stories, breaking both ankles and his right forearm. He hobbled himself to his van and drove himself to the hospital because nobody was home. He said he didn't feel anything until he got to the ER and sat down. Got a call about a noise disturbance from a farm at the edge of city limits. Turns out a party had been hijacked by a tweaker who thought it was a good idea to break into a house full of teenagers. It turned into a 3-hour hostage situation. The guy crashed when the substances left his system. Nobody got hurt, luckily. One time I called 311 because a guy had a handsaw and was cutting down a tree along the sidewalk of Clark Street in Chicago. The 311 operator said she was connecting me to 911, and I tried to say it wasn't a big deal, just send someone when you can. She interrupted me, "You're telling me that a man with a saw is on Clark Street and showing signs of being nuts?" Yeah, I guess when you put it like that. 911, please. When I took calls for 101, which is the UK non-emergency police line, I had a similar call. I don't really know who to call, but there's a guy walking down the street with a big knife and he's just shanking trees and stuff. He turned out to be an autistic young man on his way back from fishing and was surprised and apologetic to hear that his behavior had caused alarm. Also, we had another one. There's a group of kids in McDonald's with an automatic weapon. And when I asked the caller why he hadn't called the emergency number, he got all uppity and replied, "Well, I don't know if it's a real shooter now, do I?" It wasn't, thankfully, but it's impossible to tell unless a trained officer is holding it in their hand. And again, this is the UK, so it was extremely unusual to even see a weapon in the wild. I called about a lost dog near the beach one summer. The dispatcher asked if it had a collar, what breed it was, and we eventually realized it was a coyote. For bonus points, when animal control and the cops showed up, they told me it had rabies. Thankfully, it was early enough that nobody was at the beach yet. Turns out, if a seemingly healthy wild animal like a coyote is trying to be friendly with humans, it most likely has rabies. Rabies can make animals go through a state of being unafraid of humans, so you should always stay far away from anything that wants to make friends. I used to work for 111, which is the non-emergency medical line here in the UK. I once had a call from a carer for an elderly lady who was in a wheelchair and pretty much immobile. Upon taking the call, one of the first questions I asked was, "Can I possibly speak to the patient?" which is normally a quick yes or no. The carer hummed and hawed for a good couple of minutes before deciding, no, I couldn't speak to the patient. Her reasoning was, the patient couldn't breathe and was turning blue. A friend and I were walking my dog past a local elementary school over winter break when we thought we heard a fire alarm ringing and faintly smelled smoke. We figured we were both just over-imaginative since nobody was around or seemed to be concerned. An hour later, as we were walking back, we passed the elementary school again and the alarm and the smoke smell were still there. We decided to call the non-emergency line since nobody else in the surrounding neighborhood seemed to have noticed anything, and we didn't want to look like teenagers pulling a prank. The operator answered, and after we explained it to her, she said, "Wait, you're telling me you think an elementary school has been on fire for the past hour and you didn't consider that an emergency?" The fire was pretty small and there was no structural damage, but yeah, that was not a smart moment. I've never even told my mother that I'm one of the unnamed sources that alerted the authorities to the fire in the local elementary school. It's a secret my dog and I will take to our graves. Not a dispatcher, but a paramedic. We got a call for a fall, and the patient only needed help up. Per dispatch notes, reporting party said patient was breathing, conscious, and was at her normal mental status. We didn't run lights or sirens due to no apparent life threats and the relatively short distance, under 2 miles with light traffic. We get inside and the patient is having a full-blown stroke. She's unresponsive and was struggling to breathe. The wall right next to her head had a hole that busted through the drywall. Patient ended up having a hemorrhagic stroke, and it was believed to have happened when she hit the wall. We took her home on hospice a few days later. It still annoys me to this day about the whole situation, but you live and you learn. However, there isn't much we or the hospital could have done. The family honored her wishes and asked for comfort measures.
I went to one fall where a patient was reporting a sore knee and not much else. When we got there, it turned out she'd fallen 3 meters from a ladder while fixing her gutters the day before. I'm pretty sure she blacked out for a while and her right knee and leg was at least twice the size of her left one. She couldn't bend it at all to even attempt getting in a car and couldn't even see where her kneecap had gone. The X-ray later revealed it was about 4 inches further around her leg than it should have been. Also turns out she had multiple breaks in her tibia and fibula. Cranial X-ray also revealed a skull fracture. She lived alone and was in no condition to drive herself to the hospital, but wasn't sure it was serious enough to call an ambulance for. Decided to call when her leg didn't seem any better the next day. My advice is if you fall 3 meters from a ladder onto concrete, you need to go to the hospital. Almost 10 years working on 911 here. I think it's about a 50-50 split for emergencies taken on 911 lines versus non-emergency lines. Shock does really weird things to people. And some people panic and call in emergencies that aren't emergencies to any rational person, but the caller isn't thinking rationally. I've taken calls for self-deletion by firearm, rollover accidents, and house fires on non-emergent lines only to turn around and answer a 911 line for something like, my neighbor's dogs are barking and won't shut up. I work in emergency road service. I got a call for a lockout where a disabled woman was locked inside her car because of electrical issues. Because she had some kind of electronic assistance for getting in or out of the car and the car was dead, she was stuck. It was snowing to beat the band and non-emergency response times were 4 hours. It was 20 degrees Fahrenheit out. I told her to call 911 and she absolutely refused to do it. There are plenty of times that people call in underestimating the severity of the patient's symptoms, but what's more frustrating is when people call the non-emergency line and immediately demand an ambulance. It's like, you know what the emergency number is, right? If you think it's an emergency, call them, you dimwit. I think it annoys me that you can't even just tell people they're calling the wrong number in this sort of situation, with a sick burn and a hang-up, because technically you can call an ambulance for them, and you probably should if someone's actually in a critical condition. Not exactly the right time to be hitting someone with the one-liner of the century. Oh my god, this happens all the time. Patients call non-emergency for what's clearly a stroke. Meanwhile, I've got a regular on 911 calling me about their toe pain. It's usually old people. It's not an emergency, but I fell 10 hours ago and I've just now been able to crawl to the phone. I just need some help getting up. Oh, and please don't have them using all of their lights and sirens. I don't want to wake up the neighbors. Or, I'm having chest pain and can't really breathe right. I just want someone to come check me out. Or, my husband hasn't been able to have a bowel movement in a while and now he's having some really bad stomach pains. They usually downplay things that can go really, really badly for them really fast. I think they feel embarrassed or like they don't want to be a nuisance. I'm a firefighter and numerous times people will call to the station to report an emergency. We still have to tell them to call 911 because we're not allowed to self-dispatch. Firefighters don't mess around. Called 911 a few weeks ago because the main fire alarm in my building went off and there was a lot of smoke in the hallway. I didn't know if it was an actual fire or just a burned meal, so I took my dog and went outside to call. While I was outside, my neighbor kept saying, don't call 911, I'll get fined. Too late though, I'd already called. About 2 minutes later, not 1, not 2, but 4 fire trucks arrived with their sirens and lights on. 3 or 4 firefighters went in and came out a few minutes later. 15 minutes later, only 2 trucks remained and the guys were just gossiping beside their trucks. My significant other went to one of them and asked if we could go in. We were about 6 people outside and the majority of the tenants remained indoors even during the fire alarm. May God help them if a real fire ever occurs. The firefighter says, of course, it was just smoke build up in one of the apartments. Of course, my neighbor didn't want to get fined because he probably removed his fire detector in his apartment and opened his door to let the smoke out into the hallway instead of opening the window. I feel bad for my other neighbors though. Their cat ran away when they took him outside. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Got a non-emergency call from a mother telling me her daughter, who was home alone, had called her mum and said that someone had just kicked in her front door and she was hiding under her bed with the person roaming through the house. So I dispatched all of my units, in which they get there in about 2 minutes, and it just turned out it was the landlord that gave 24-hour notice to come fix a light. Definitely an emergency that turned out to be nothing. Mum should have called 911 in that situation. I've taken legitimate emergencies on the non-emergency line. Most memorable was a lady who shot her husband and just called us to collect the body, please. What always shocked me was when it was busy and I'd ask, is this an emergency or can you hold?
People would always say that they could hold, but then have legit emergencies, like, no, that knife in your sternum probably can't hold. I often found that in-shock people tend to get hyper-focused on one detail and leave out all of the vital ones. Once a man tried to climb in my bedroom window. At the time, I had a really old, crappy bed that was always coming apart, so I pulled the leg off and scared him away with it. Then I called the non-emergency line because he was already gone. There was a helicopter overhead and cop cars at my door in less than a minute, and the dispatcher was like, "Next time, you can just call 911. I've taken one where a guy told me that he'd just shot his neighbor, and another where a man said he'd woken up and found his wife had ended herself sometime in the night. Multiple elderly women said that their husband had passed away in the night. Old women take it in their stride, and the old men break down when they find their wife dead. I've been a 911 dispatcher for over 30 years now, and when I first started back in the late 80s in southeast Oklahoma, all of the calls came on our 7-digit number. They didn't get 911 there until 2002. I moved to the city in the early 90s. 3 a.m. at the 14th of June, 2018. Mum's not waking up. It happens more often than everyone thinks, and every time it's even worse. That's my dad's story. A family called in because the elderly grandmother had injured her leg. They couldn't quite describe how it happened, but somehow this poor lady's femur was broken and sticking out of the skin. Evidently, this led to charges for elderly mistreatment and neglect. I can only guess that they called the non-emergency line to downplay the severity. We have this thing called Erstfunkendienst, which is a non-emergency hotline where you can call on weekends and workdays from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. if you're sick and want a visit from a general practitioner. It's to keep the ambulances away from too many non-emergency calls. Usually, people wait about 30 minutes to 4 hours depending on the workload. One day, a retirement home nurse, I'm not sure if she was an actual nurse or someone else, she called and told our dispatcher that someone coded and they're providing CPR. The dispatcher guided them while also connecting to the main ambulance service. Just before he could connect them, they also told him their building was on fire. In the end, one guy coding was declared dead, but no one else was hurt. I never heard exactly what happened or if the fire or CPR were related. I'm a dispatcher, and I've had someone call in a legit breaking and entering on a non-emergency line. A lot of domestics and a few shots fired calls. Mostly we deal with people who've called 911 for something that's 100% not emergent. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, my car's been towed. Or, I need to make a noise complaint. I don't want to be a bother, but I've been on the floor for 4 days and I haven't had anything to eat or drink and nobody has a key but me. I just need a bit of help off the floor. He had managed to crawl to the phone and kick the table until the phone fell on the floor. He was so dehydrated he spent a week in intensive care. I work for the fire service, so we get a lot of, "Oh, it's not an emergency," emergencies. I had an old lady call once and very calmly say, "I've got a small fire in my kitchen." We sent a couple of fire engines and the building was fully involved in fire. In the time between taking the call and arriving, the fire shouldn't have taken the whole building. They reckon from CCTV that her call was made when the whole house was already alight. She was just super chill about the whole thing. Also had a very calm caller to a fire outside near a village, and when we got there it was a fully involved recycling center on fire. Building was massive and full of the sort of things you don't want to be on fire. It happens surprisingly often, especially from other emergency services. Police will pass a minor RTC and will turn up and it's 3 lorries, 2 cars, a fatality, air ambulance required, just the works. Honestly, it never ceases to amaze me. These older folks who don't want to be a bother really remind me of my gran. We've had her on the ground in a pretty serious state before, all while murmuring, "Oh, I don't want to cause a fuss," to the emergency services while she slipped in and out of consciousness. Scary stuff. She was fine in the end, though. It wasn't over the phone, but my mother, who's a doctor in the countryside, once had a patient walk in with his severed hand in a bag and protest vehemently when the horrified people in the waiting room were telling him to jump the damn queue. "Oh, but no, you ladies were here first, I insist." Transcript of a call I took one time. 911, what's the location of your emergency? Hi, I need a non-emergent transport of a patient from X nursing facility to the hospital. Okay, how old and what's the gender of the patient? 79 and female. Okay, what's the issue she's had? Well, she fell and hit her head against concrete and now she isn't breathing. And this is non-emergent? Yes. Okay, I've got them en route. Have you started CPR? No. Should we? There was a truck that wrecked out in a field near my house, likely while messing around in the hills. I called to non-emergency line and the dispatcher asked me to get closer to see if there was anyone in there. There were 2 guys in it. They lived, but it was definitely a scary thing for me at the time. A tornado hit a nearby town and the influx of calls was too great for their county to handle, so I got the overflow. I took dozens of calls from a city I wasn't familiar with people screaming about being buried in rubble or saying that they couldn't find their child. One man said his neighbors were gone because they lived in a manufactured home next door and the entire thing was missing. Not knocked down or heavily damaged, missing as if it was snapped out of existence. That couple died. It wasn't a great day. And for levity, this one should have caused more emergencies, but it didn't. We had a minor earthquake once, about a 5.2, and this was shortly after 4:30 in the morning. I had dozens of 911 calls that went like this. 911, what's your emergency? Did we just have an earthquake? Yes, what's your emergency? I was thinking a wall might have collapsed or someone was hurt or there'd been a gas leak. Oh, I don't have an emergency. I just wondered if it was an earthquake. My favorite one of these was the woman who called about 5 minutes after it happened and goes, "Oh, what was it on the Richter scale?" I was frustrated and said sarcastically, "I don't know, Mom, our seismometer is broken." And she says, "Oh," she wasn't smart enough to get the sarcasm. This story is similar but different. Hopefully it'll still be interesting to someone. This happened early on in my life when I was taking flight lessons, and it was fairly cold out one day, but we didn't think icing would be a problem since there weren't any clouds below around 12,000 feet. We got up to around 2,500 AGL, and my instructor, who, although he had a few hundred hours flying, was still a bit new as a CFI, told me to do a power-off stall. This simulates stalling on final approach to landing, and essentially, you slow down to approach speed, flaps extended, and then keep holding your altitude using the elevator without adding power until you stall. To recover, you apply full power and pitch the nose down until you gain enough speed to level out again. So I stall the plane, apply full power, and the engine just almost quit. Which, obviously, is exactly what you want to happen when you apply full power to recover from a stall. The engine didn't actually die, but my instructor immediately took the controls and asked me to start going through the entire trouble checklist while he contacted the airport and asked for clearance to land as soon as possible. The controller gave us clearance and then asked what was going on. When he found out, he very pointedly asked us if we wanted to declare an emergency. At first, my instructor started to say, "No, we've gone through most of the checklist without any issues," but then, and I can still remember the tone in his voice, he says, "No, we've almost had an engine failure, we're declaring an emergency." And he changed our squawk code to 7700, which is general emergency. And holy heck did that get a response. They literally shut down the entire airport for the 15 or so minutes it took us to get back and land. It was early evening, and as we were coming in, I could see the lights from what seemed to be every volunteer fire department in a 10-mile radius of the airport turning out to come to the field and provide assistance if needed. My instructor's phone started blowing up because apparently a lot of his friends have apps that notify them when someone squawks 7700, and they saw our plane's registration number. Pro tip, don't do that. If there's an actual emergency, your friend won't need the distraction of their phone going off. The controller at the airport was cool as ice, and he made regular requests for status updates as we came in. Fortunately, there wasn't anything to report, and I could also hear him talking to a couple of airliners about 20 miles from the airport, letting them know where they'd divert if we did end up having issues with our landing. As we lined up for landing, I could see all of the airport's emergency vehicles waiting on the taxiway, and I do mean all of them. They really turned out the cavalry. The taxiways seemed to be just absolutely covered in flashing lights. I seriously couldn't believe it. We were just 2 random guys in a Cessna Skyhawk, and I'm pretty confident that if Air Force One declared an emergency, they wouldn't have gotten a much bigger response than we did. Fortunately, the ending was pretty boring. After we got within gliding distance of the runway, they called off the volunteer firefighters, and we landed without any problems. We eventually determined that carburetor icing was the problem. Still, literally everyone involved, air traffic control, the airport safety chief, not sure of his title, the flight school owner, and the other instructors at the school, they all said we made the right call. In the moment, it was pretty scary. I still hadn't even learned how to land by myself. But it was a great lesson on taking things seriously and how much emergency crews would rather be safe than sorry. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description. Teachers guess who's popular versus bullied. The hidden hierarchy in every classroom. I'm a young high school teacher and football wrestling coach. I'm very aware and I try hard to make everyone feel accepted. Often the bullies are kids that I coach. If the athletes in my class act like meatheads, I make it very clear that I won't put up with it. I've pulled many an athlete into the hallway during some downtime to let him know I saw him being ignorant to a student and it's in poor character. It rarely takes more than one of these conversations. Because of my position in the school, I've never had to do so much as raise my voice, and still maintain a pretty laid-back atmosphere. I also spend most of my downtime reaching out to kids that aren't popular. I talk indie music to the artsy types, and they often burn me CDs of their bands. Sometimes they even turn me onto a new group that ends up on my iPod. I watch far more crappy movies on Netflix than I probably should, so I sometimes spend my lunch period gabbing with the movie nerds in the cafeteria. I encourage students to use my work email at any time. I have a habit of answering through my phone even though I'm off the clock, but my fiancée is a teacher and she gets it. I spend so much time with the athletes after school and on the weekends, I almost find myself overcompensating during the school day so I don't come off as a caveman to my students that I don't coach. In short, I notice and I try to be cool to everyone regardless of interest or clique, regardless of the impact on my reputation amongst the jocks. When my mother was a teacher, a lot of her kids would actually pass gossip along to her, even if she told them not to tell her. So she knew who was doing the deed with who and who got drunk every weekend. Yeah, she definitely knew. And even if you don't straight up tell a teacher things like that, I think it's pretty intuitive, at least to an extent. As a teacher, you can tell who the good-looking jocks are and who the awkward nerds are. You don't all of a sudden become numb to social stuff once you become a teacher. On the contrary, you probably pick it up better because you're constantly around that high school environment. I pick up a lot of cues at lunch. It's also recess for little kids. Sadly, a lot of teachers use that time to socialize amongst themselves instead of paying attention to the kids. The little kids used to tell me that they were glad when I was on duty because I was the only one who'd stop the fights. Most of my teachers favored the charming substance dealers, even after a few got caught. Damn those devil-may-care, charismatic little monsters. I'll admit they're probably the more entertaining ones to pass the time with, but you have to take care of the little narrators of the world too. What about us ugly little nerds? Of course we try to care about everyone. If it's about popularity, we really don't care, and neither will you as you age. It's about bullying. So yes, we care and we want to help. If a bully crosses the line, tell us or tell the principal. Also, most of us frickin' hate bullies. I'm a teacher, I pick up on it, but it's usually not as obvious as you'd think. The ones that are the most popular are usually not the ones who are the center of attention at school, and certainly not in class. It's more clear-cut who's popular amongst the boys than among the girls. I try to treat them like I would any other normal student, meaning no special attention, no privileges, but I'll also admit that I do try to charm them, make them like me and stuff. It's a great tool to have the popular students on your side as a long-term project to prevent bullying. I taught life skills to 14-year-olds when I was in pre-med. Even though I didn't know the kids or didn't know any of their names, it was easy to see who the popular ones were, and even who was popular because the other kids feared him or her, and who was popular because the other kids genuinely liked them. I always talked with the kids about homosexuality, and to keep them open-minded, the trick is to first ask the genuinely liked popular kid for his or her opinion, because that kid is the most likely to give their actual opinion instead of what they think the class wants to hear. Seeing who was bullied was harder. There were always some kids who didn't really participate, but that might have just been shyness because of the whoopee talk we had to take in that class. I work as a teacher and a teacher's aide, which requires me to actually sit in class with the students and help them write their work out. I see a lot of things that teachers don't normally see or hear. I see a lot of bullying in the classroom as well. I do my best to diffuse most situations without humiliating the kids. Otherwise, I report them to the headmaster. I refuse to sit back and watch the social bullcrap of high school ruin some poor kid's life. Of course the teachers know. I taught 4th grade. I could even tell which student was already on his way to becoming the stereotypical jock bully. Smart kid too. And yeah, I made a big effort to make him realize that doing what he was doing was wrong. There was a lot of peer pressure working against him though. I don't think anything I said ever stuck. On a more positive note though, one of my favorite students was the girl who never spoke a word during class. I noticed that she had a Wizards of Waverly Place folder for her spelling, and one day I made a little note about the show in it. What, a 25-year-old guy can't like Disney Channel? Want to fight about that? Anyway, every week, when I took the folders home to grade the tests, I made sure to comment on this week's episode, or other Disney Channel-related things, or something else in general. She did the same. She must have spoken about 50 words to me all semester, but I still felt like I knew her very well. More or less, I think the teachers know. However, I know that at least in the boarding school I'm currently teaching in my country,
Some kids can be both popular in one group and detested in another. The effeminate kids who had a ton of girlfriends, but who no boys would want to work with, for example. Being associated with effeminate boys is an effeminate thing in itself. Boys would say harsh words to these kids in my class or outside it, and the girls would defend them. Teachers? Well, most, if not all teachers except me here, are religious Muslims, and the male teachers especially outright condemn effeminate male students as potential gays, and think that they should be toughened up by bullying, or be forced to play more sports to make them manly. They don't care that almost all of these so-called effeminate boys that I know are highly brilliant kids. They're imperfect male students because they're not manly in their eyes. Girls can be quite complicated since their appearances are all similar and they wear hijabs in my school. I have so much trouble trying to remember their names, but you can generally see the outspoken ones, the sporty athletic types, the religious or shy ones who won't even speak in class or interact with male classmates, and there's this cliquey kind of thing. For reasons sometimes my lessons won't work well because they aren't grouped with their usual friends. Charismatic students tend to shine in the class all right. Charismatic religious students more so. Even in American high school, I got flack for hanging out with girls. It's really weird logic. Oh, he hangs out with girls all the time. He must be so gay. Yeah, because spending time with the ladies is the gayest thing I can think of. I'm that super gay dude who's always hanging out with more women than the rest of you guys. Oh, they just assumed you were talking about dongs and stuff. You know, normal girl talk. I'm not a teacher, but I work with groups of kids. There are certain kids that you can just always tell get left out or bullied, and I try to make sure they're included. You can't always push that, though, without making things worse. I do call out kids who are bullying, though. I tend to pull them aside the first time and explain that I don't put up with that bullcrap and they'd better straighten out. Although I word it in a more kid-friendly way, they know what I mean. If they continue, I do call them out in front of everyone. Hey Nancy, that's not cool, and such. I found that after a while it becomes uncool to be a little jerk, and I feel okay about that. I had one teacher who, at the end of the year, didn't count me absent when I was out because she didn't know I existed. She'd say out in class, "Is anyone absent?" My friend would say, Teresa isn't here." Teresa? I didn't like that teacher anyway. But that was only one person. I only had a couple of teachers who'd go out of their way to interfere with students' lives. I'm sure that teachers forget students all the time, and I wonder how the heck the thought process goes when they have to give their parent-teacher interviews. Is this how you get a teacher to give you a rave review? Because they literally had no idea who you were and had to improvise something? Maybe that explains a lot of my class behavior reviews. Oh, it's easy to tell who's popular. Bullying is often much more discreet. I'm not trying to say that I never see it or infer that it happened, but nobody wants to be a rat, and bullied kids often try to avoid further embarrassment by not telling a teacher. I'm going to say you should tell teachers if you see bullying happen, even if it's after the fact. You can really make a big difference in someone's life. Bullying can cause lasting problems in a person's life. I wasn't popular, nor was I a top student, but then I was only 8 years old. A teacher pulled me out of class, brought me into the year below, and asked me to spell which. At the time, I had no idea how. I couldn't tell you now what letters I threw out there, but it was way off. The whole class laughed, and I wanted to cry. She then led me back into the other class. I've got no idea why she did that. I later heard she died. I laughed and got on with my life with a bit more of a smile on my face. You want to know something? This doesn't necessarily go away in college. I'm in a series of classes where several of the girls who are friends with each other are actually pretty mean to me. It got to the point where I went to one of my professors and told him that it made me hate going to class and that I dreaded participating. He said he'd noticed and that I should keep participating. He would attempt to avoid activities which would require us to work together, which I appreciated more than an attempt to make them like me, because I'm honestly not interested in convincing mean girls who never grew out of it to like me. He did assure me that my contributions are relevant and meaningful, and it's just made speaking up and not caring about their reaction a lot easier, actually. Seriously, having someone confirm that they noticed and encouraging me to keep trying was probably the best thing that could have happened. Something I'll definitely keep in mind if I'm ever teaching myself. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Somewhat unrelated, but it's a fantastic teacher story, so I'm going to share it anyway. In high school, I was going through some fairly unsettling business with my real dad, the details of which are not worth getting into. Anyway, I got to know one of my teachers very well. She became the adult confidant that, up until then, was mostly just my mother and stepdad, and I owe her everything for the support and outlet she gave me during that time.
Moving on, I took said teacher's history class in my junior year, which was all around fantastic because she was well known as being one of the coolest teachers around. A guy friend of mine that I'd known for a while but started spending more time with, as friends, was also in that history class. Mrs. K started bugging me constantly about the crush I'd developed on this friend. So about midway through the year, she gets the ridiculous idea to ask the both of us, me and him, to babysit her kids one night. Long story short, he agreed, which was weird. When we got there, the kids were already asleep. She showed us to a bowl of popcorn, a movie, and the couch, and left on her merry way. While nothing actually happened that night, said gentleman and I eventually dated briefly towards the end of the year, and Miss K could not have been more thrilled. In short, Kick Butt High School was also a kick butt wing woman. As one of those kids that was bullied, I think teachers could do a lot more to help those kids out. I'll be completely honest when I say that to me it felt like many of the teachers knew and just couldn't care less. A few of them even participated in it. When you're a kid in that situation, it's not that you're embarrassed or anything like that stops you from telling anybody. It's the fact that it's obviously going on right in front of the teachers and they don't do a thing about it. If they won't stop it when they see it, why would they care if I said something? That was a few years ago for me, but I imagine not much has changed. You know that one little butthole that everyone hates? Not a bullying sort of thing, but the one that all of those annoying childhood friend memes are all about. Yeah, that kid. We hate him too. My girlfriend and her mum are teachers at the same school, and yes, they discuss which kids are the better looking ones, which ones are the nerds, which ones they like and which ones they don't. They also get told a whole bunch of stuff too to help them with those opinions. Oh, we spot them, easily. I teach kids who can't really speak English, and I don't really speak Korean, and it's not difficult to identify the roles of different students. I'm sure it's even more obvious for teachers in their native language and culture. I split up the bullies from the students who get bullied, scatter the smart and motivated students across the room to encourage others, and utilize the popular kids as activity leaders. Understanding the personality of your individual students and class as a whole is incredibly important in education and classroom management. As one of the smart and motivated students who is always paired with the people who did absolutely nothing, please stop. It sucks when you get stuck doing all of the work in a group project because the other person has no idea about any of the concepts, doesn't understand time management, and knows that if they keep postponing it, the other person will just do it. I'd much rather be with people who like the class and will work hard with me. My most memorable thing was constructing a fake city to look like a cell in 7th grade, and I was placed with 3 of the slackers in the group. I talked with them every week during the month and would organize a time that they said would work, and they'd never show up. So I ended up doing the entire model by myself the weekend before and getting an A, but so did 3 other people who didn't know the difference between a nucleus and a mitochondria. In short, group projects suck. Well, that reply was a little off topic, but it does highlight a point from the initial answer that I hadn't considered. Just throwing the hardworking kids out to the wolves expecting that they can inspire the other slackers is naive at best and harmful to their own grades at worst. I was not popular at all. Chubby, learning disabled, and didn't come from a family with money. I wore clothes from the Goodwill and I grew up in a trailer. I was picked last, made fun of about everything. I suffered from depression and tried to hurt myself a couple of times. I was always a student of the week the last week of school too. Teachers would yell at me. Anyway, I lost weight, went to college, got a job, a nice car, and I'm building a house now. I've got 2 good-looking babies and a great husband. The people who made my life hell are now living in their own hell. My goal is to raise loving, empathetic, good, caring children. Yeah, I knew exactly who was cool and who wasn't. I also had the realization that I knew little to nothing about what they find interesting and vice versa for the most part. I liked to encourage kids that weren't popular and do what I could, but at the end of the day they had to live in their world. The saddest part was how I had to interact with the popular kids. They were typically charismatic, charming, and confident. They were alphas. So sometimes it was a pleasure to interact with them, but they could also equally make class hell. I had 30 to 40 students per class, and I had no choice but to make friends with the alphas, or nothing would get done. It's easy to know who's bullied. The gingers, the fat kids, the ones with glasses, the lanky nerds, the kids with volcanic acne, and the emos. Stereotypes work. I don't know, man. I'm sure there's plenty of lanky, emo, fat, ginger, popular kids with glasses and volcanic acne out there somewhere. Actually, on a serious note, I wonder if the number of people who'd get bullied because of having glasses has gone down now, considering glasses aren't really a rare thing these days. I was never popular, and none of the teachers treated me as well as the popular kids. I don't know if the teachers were bullied when they were younger and felt the need to cater to the popular ones as sort of reliving the childhood dream thing,
because it made the popular kids like them better as teachers, but it sucked. I remember in music class in elementary, we were also taught dance. Nobody wanted to dance with me, and no one noticed, not even the teacher. I quietly brought it up with the teacher, and he asked the class if anyone would like to dance again. A bunch of girls leapt up, excitedly planning who'd dance with whom. When the teacher added, "Who'd like to dance with Dylan?" they all muttered a collective, "Oh," and sat down quickly again. I was in the front of the class, standing alone. There was no rebuke, there were no kind words. After that, I began to notice the way teachers treat unpopular kids compared to the popular ones. Even in subtle ways, there was a difference, and it was never in my favor, no matter how good I tried to be. In short, teachers are jerks. In middle school, one of the more popular kids was bullying one of the quieter, weirder kids in our grade. The poor guy was bullied quite often by this kid, who was an absolute jerk, and I think the teachers began to notice. Anyway, one day the quiet kid decided to stand up for himself. The more popular kid pushes him and tried to entice him to a fight. So the quiet kid obliges and punches him hard in the face. The two go at it for a couple of minutes until a teacher runs over and arm tackles the popular kid to the ground. Doesn't say a word, but picks him up by his shirt collar in a "you're coming with me" kind of way and drags him to the principal. Neither the teacher nor the quiet kid got in any trouble, and everyone clapped. In short, justice. Yeah, you can see it even at the university and college level. I'm a teacher's assistant who became a professor here, by the way. However, you'd think that the whole "I'm paying to be here" thing would solve this, but it seldom does. Pre-med students are the worst. "Oh, I'm a pre-med, therefore I'm entitled to all the things, including your own personal phone number, your local employees only hangout, and a few other things." Smart people bully the former bullies. I've seen it so many damn times it gets really old. People will go to great lengths to screw someone over, especially those who they think wronged them in the past by some misguided way. Let's see, sabotaging others' work? Check. Accusing someone of cheating? Check. Accusing someone of harassment? Check. I quit assigning collaborative work assignments because there was always that guy who gets left out. Call him hamster smell guy or midlife crises lady, because they could never get a fair shake. So you could say, yeah, I picked up on this stuff all the time. I knew who the bullcrap artists were, who the slackers were, and who really put out. I mean, grade-wise. For people in my course, Introduction to Geology and Geological History, there were many assignments given, but the catch was I never graded people on how they did numerically, but how they performed it if put on the spot, which in turn takes the student integrity thing to a whole new level. And that's why I quit my teaching position, went into industry, and only offer private tutoring. I love that universities are simultaneously the epitome of educational sophistication, as well as being staffed and attended by some of the meanest, most petty, childlike individuals you've ever seen. Or maybe that's just everywhere, including regular workplaces. No surprises here, really. Yes, we know who's who in the class. I used to teach high school English. It was very clear which kids were popular, which were the bullies, and which were bullied. And yes, I freaking hated the bullies and did everything in my unfortunately limited power to make it stop. The kids who were more fragile or less popular or off the beaten path, I talked to them a lot after school. I got involved sponsoring student clubs, college bowl sort of stuff, math team, and other activities to try to ensure everybody's integration and respect. More than 30 years later, I'm Facebook friends with some of the kids who were unpopular or had troubles. I'm happy to report that they're great people with full lives, and they only think of high school as a blip on their radar. Yep, we can tell. It's tough to watch. And it's even worse when you can tell why they get picked on, and it's even worse when it irks you too, like on the disruptive kid or the extra stinky kid. Teacher in France here. Yeah, we know who's popular, we know who's going out with who, we catch glances and we know what they mean. We intercept some notes between students and we read them. We're curious about all of that because we're interested in what's happening in the class. If we understand the dynamics of the class, we can better adapt to it and be generally more efficient. And we obviously know who gets bullied. Come on, most teachers have been bullied themselves. What do I do with this information? Well, I try to catch a bully in the act to just humiliate him the best way I can find. I try not to take sides with the bullied because I just can't protect the kid all the time, and the bully would just take revenge on him when I'm not there. Nobody likes bullies, but teachers, we frickin' hate them. They're bringing the whole class down, and it takes a lot of time and energy to heal all the pain they've caused. And that's if we couldn't all get rid of the bully. I wish we could do more to fight them. Sometimes we're just powerless, especially when said bully just doesn't fear or learn from any sanctions. Having taught high school, it was painfully clear which students were popular and which kids were struggling socially.
I felt a moral obligation to make sure all the kids in my classroom felt validated and welcome, and tried to combat cafeteria politics from permeating into an English class. For teachers trying to work against this too, I recommend pre-assigning groups for projects so that kids who don't usually interact with each other have to talk and collaborate. In most cases, you won't see some breakfast club bullcrap, but students will realize that the weird kid is actually kind of funny, or the basketball player has some profound stuff to say about Lord of the Flies as well. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.